Hey guys, good evening. Welcome out to Revolution. We're starting video number 29 of examining TurretinFan's response concerning Revelation 16:5 by Nick Sayers. And so if you can hear lots of fans, it's quite hot here today. So I'm in the office with the window open and a lot of fans going. And so sorry about the sounding like I'm in a car or a jet. So we're just going to start straight away, I think. Most of you guys know what this is all about. So TurretinFan has been doing videos. It seems like he's going through anything on the internet that has anything to do with Revelation 16:5. I guess trying to find out where I got my material from or other people who have copied my material. I sort of did feel when he was doing the Josh Gibbs one that he was almost alluding to some of the things that Josh Gibbs got wrong, which it's quite an in-depth subject, and he got a few things wrong, and he was like, "Look, he's following Nick, and he's getting it wrong." And it was like, hey, because I remember watching it when Josh Gibbs did that, and I thought, well, and so I contacted him and gave him a few pointers, and I ended up doing a few videos with him, but in no way am I responsible for anyone who reads my material and doesn't re-represent that exactly as I did? You know what I mean? So anyway, I sort of felt that was happening. But let's just jump straight into this video. I'm just going to shut a few things down just to make it a little bit less cluttered. And we are on video number 21. We're at 16:40. Now I'm just going to double check to make sure, because last time, here we are, 16:51 and part 21. Okay, because last time not last time, but the time before, I think I ended up doing another 40 minutes or something that I didn't really need to do. It was a big waste of time. But perhaps, I believe God's got a purpose for everything. Perhaps I needed to go back through that. So let's continue on with TurretinFan. And as I said, it's sort of unfortunate that TurretinFan is going through Jan Kranz's material. I don't mind people going through Jan Kranz's material as long as they're not just believing everything that's there. And so the thing is, once you're on a level where you listen to Bart Ehrman regularly, which I do. I listen to Bart Ehrman's material. I mean, Bart Ehrman, what was he saying today? It was about the virgin birth, and he was saying that he's bringing out a new series that proves that people didn't believe in the virgin birth, that they believe that Jesus's parents were Joseph and Mary. And that is in the critical text. It says that in the Textus Receptus, those verses clearly say that Joseph and Mary, they might get called the parents by just unsuspecting bystanders, but when it comes to the narrative, it talks about Mary, or it talks about the mother and Joseph, not the parents. And so, but the newer Bibles, the Westcott and Hort type of Bibles, Alexandrian-based, text-based Bibles, they changed these. And so Bart Ehrman's found a hole in that, and he's making videos on it, and he's going to be doing a big presentation on that. And so when I listen to Bart Ehrman, I just find he is, I think where he actually went south, I think he was always a little bit south, having, the critical text mentality and being under Bruce Metzger, which is sort of like, being a scientist and you're underneath Fauci or someone like that. It's like I know that Bruce Metzger is seen as like a guru of the text, where to me he is he's absolutely heretical. He's deeply compromised and a perverter of the Word of God, has no desire to encourage faith. But you talk to these people in the academy and he's a great man, and the thing is, I mean, aren't Jehovah's Witnesses great men? They always look at just oh, well, they're nice, they're kind, and all this sort of stuff. And, not like that Nick who just says it how it is, and not like Jesus flipping tables and stuff. It's like, these guys were just heretical. So Bart Ehrman is a predictable result of the academy. And I think when he was critiquing the Da Vinci Code, I think that's where he realized that him, with his credentials, he could turn around and really rattle some cages about the Bible. And so that's when, Jesus Interrupted came on the scene, and, 6-time New York Times bestseller, Bart Ehrman, with his books is. And so, but when I listen to him, all he's doing is he's just going through and saying the worst case scenario for everything. And I was thinking, TurretinFan is going through my material, and as I mentioned, there's really not even any wriggle room whatsoever. Just none. There's not. There's rarely ever an acknowledgement of, unless he's talking about me, of the I am, Jehovah, the full name of God. You're going down that rabbit hole and explaining how you can have the name of God expanded, but it's not really the name of God. It's just got this other element to it, and it's just strange. And so I feel like I've done a whole bunch of work that's just almost completely ignored. It's just swept aside, just conveniently, like, no, we're not dealing with that. Let's deal with the issues that that don't really matter in light of those things. And so it's a bit like when you're looking at the grammatical errors in, like, say, 1 John 5:7, the solecism. Now, I was on James Snap Jr.'s Facebook page the other day, and for some reason they had some King James guy on there who was just saying all this stuff, and everyone was like, oh, you're wrong on this, wrong on that. And I don't know why, but James Snap Jr. was pretending to be a pirate or something. I didn't really get it. But they brought up the comma, and so I put a URL to my blog where I talked to Georgios Babiniotis, a world-leading expert in the Greek language. And straight away, James Snap Jr. and what I said, people are ignoring the grammatical evidence. They just won't go there. All they want to talk about is the manuscript evidence there in the Greek. They don't want to talk about Latin manuscript evidence. They don't want to talk about citations by the early church writers. They don't want to talk about the solecism. They just want to talk about, we've got a bunch of manuscripts and you don't. And that's all they want to talk about. And so, lo and behold, James Snap Jr. replied and said, here's a link to Nick's page and how many Greek manuscripts he has, and I had to my TR site. And here's a link to my page with all the manuscripts that back up our reading. And I'm like, well, aren't you just proving my point? You're just talking about stuff, but you like, as if I don't know that, as if everyone else doesn't know that. Why do you just keep repeating something like, are you interested that the world-leading expert in the Greek language has come on our side and said that there is a solecism there? There is an issue in the critical text. And this was also spotted by Gregory Nazianzus. This was also spotted by Erasmus, Eugenius Vulgaris. And the whole conversation was about Eugenius Vulgaris in 1780 when he mentioned about these issues. And so, but they don't want to deal with that because it's an inconvenient truth. And see, sometimes there is evidence that overrides if you got 1 million manuscripts. And see, the strange thing is, I can understand James Snap Jr. doing that. He's a majority text guy. For the life of me, I can't understand why TurretinFan's doing this, unless he is morphing into a majority text guy. Because, like, just sort of listening through, he's been critiquing some of the other people, King James Onlyists and things like that, who are on YouTube and have their own opinions on Revelation 16:5. And I'm just hearing him use argumentation that doesn't go down well in the academy. if you're an apologist, it will go down well, because apologists, they'll just use the embarrassment of riches story and then dump it. As soon as they get people into the church, they'll go with Alexandria. With Vaticanus and Sinaiticus. But I'm seeing TurretinFan do this, use majority text argumentation against a lot of things, and I'm just thinking, have you really ever studied into, the only begotten God, or God was manifested in the flesh, where the theos is turned into an os, and have you looked at these things and the manuscript evidence? Because most of the places that we talk about against the critical text, we have like 99.9% majority. Last 12 verses of Mark. Even the Pericope Adulterae, it's like they've only got 15% of the manuscripts. We got, and so if you want to go the majority text route, which, I don't do, usually I might point out, we've got the majority here. And the thing is, if there's no good argument against something, it's like, okay, well, the majority is saying this and the minority is saying that. And you do look at those things. But TurretinFan's making this his complete case in often places where he's saying, well, the majority text says this, case closed. And it's like, but if we were used that argumentation on all the preceding variants, you would be a Byzantine guy or a TR guy. The vast majority of the time we follow the majority. And Turretin's sort of like, oh, well, the vast majority of the time everyone's following the majority. No, we're talking about where there are differences. Of course, that's Mark Ward tends to have this thing where it's like, well, most of the time everything is in agreement, and it's like, well, we're not talking about that. You don't talk about where Stalinism agrees with Nazism and go, well, they're in agreement with all this. But you're looking at the differences. You're looking at things that are causing controversy. And so, but TurretinFan's going through Jan Kranz's material, and hopefully this will open his mind up to study Beza, Stephanus, and Erasmus more. But unfortunately, see, Jan Kranz is coming from the school where they already have 10 anecdotes about Erasmus. So they've got this presupposition, and it's the strangest stories. I mean, you are looking at like QAnon sort of level conspiracy nut jobbery. And this is the thing. I look at Jan Kranz's book, read through it, picked it to pieces, and I go, okay, well, what he's saying there is true, but then he concludes something that is just like, if Gail Ripplinger was on the side of the critical text, she would come up with something like that. And you can easily prove that that's not true. But when you do, it's not like, like, Gail Ripplinger, she got it wrong. Whatever. It's not like that. They'll say that Jan Kranz got it wrong. It's just, that's modern day scholarship. Sometimes we get it wrong. And when you prove these guys wrong, it's just waved over. But when someone like Gail Ripplinger on the other side is proven wrong, it's like it's an unpardonable sin. And it's like, she's the worst ever. And it's like, you guys have got a double standard. You guys are not looking objectively at the claims of these people. And as I brought out in my previous video, there is a lot of Bart Ehrman influence here, Bruce Metzger influence, and a lot of stuff coming out of the Netherlands. That is, they have all the anecdotes on steroids, and Jan Kranz is making up his own anecdotes even today, because it's only been recently that Jeff Riddle retranslated the Latin at Revelation 16:5. It's like, he said he had an ancient manuscript. We found a bunch of evidence to support that, and he's just made up a story, and it seems to be gaining traction. And to me, this is just the strangest thing. It's like, finding out that, Albert Einstein used to eat a lot of bananas or something like that. I don't know why I keep bringing up bananas. You sound like Ken Hovine when you do. But if he wrote that down and people, they didn't have bananas then, and there were no banana trees in that whole district, and if he wanted a banana, he would have had to travel 2 miles to, it's like, can't you just believe the guy at his word? It just goes against their narrative. So no matter what, they have to keep closing the door to that. And as I mentioned in my last video, it is sort of, I'd say sad, but I guess, that's using the sort of, James White would say about me, I'm sad and all this. But with TurretinFan, I've watched enough of his material to know that, he's a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about in a lot of arenas. But when it comes to this, he has fought tooth and nail against everything. Like, I listened to the first show that he did, and he was fighting tooth and nail against Jehovah coming from Hover. And he was like, no, this is not, and I'm just there going, why is he going to these older, Hebrew dictionaries and all this sort of stuff and making a big fuss about it? And I'm just there thinking, since day dot, he approached this book not like, okay, well, I'm going to read through it and I'm going to have an open mind that this could be true. He's going, okay, he's attacked my friend, James White. So I've already got my back up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this and you could tell in the earlier videos, he's actually thinking that it's going to be an easy debunk. It's just going to be a cakewalk because, this Nick Sayers guy's just an idiot. I wouldn't suggest that he thinks that, but he thinks I'm wrong. That's probably a better way of saying it. And so he's already come with a presupposition that I'm wrong. And because you can just sense in nearly everything he's saying, it's like, just giving the worst case scenario, like Nick wouldn't have looked into that note, or Nick didn't think about this, did he, when he was doing this and doing that? And most of the time, it just comes down to TurretinFan has come to this issue knowing zero about it, pretty much. And he's fighting tooth and nail, but he's trying to learn the position, and inadvertently he's learned my position, which is great. But because every step of the way he's just doubted everything, and even just simple things. It's like, hey, this is a Strong's number that's related to this. Well, it's not on my blue letter Bible. It's not on there, and just make a big fuss about it. It's like, no, you just, I remember when I heard that first one, I got home and I looked it all up and I, studied it, and I was just like, no, he's just, I don't know why Blue Letter Bible had it like that, but when I went through a bunch of other stuff, even he himself on his blog, he's got material there that pretty much say Hava and Haya, pretty much identical almost. It's like Jehovah comes from Hava and Haya. And so, but when you understand, this is an image that I've put up the other day. So I'm just going to close some of these down. But the other day, I put up an image on where are we? Put up an image on my Facebook and also on the Textus Receptus Academy. And I cannot find it there. I think it's here. Yeah. Now check this out. So this is how basic the whole concept is. It's not that hard. And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am, hath sent me unto you. Now, I went through all this in my book, but it just seems like because TurretinFan is fighting against this, he's just not seeing the forest through the trees. And so the I am, the yeh of yeh is he will be. The hov, the hover, the hov of hover is he is. And the of haya is he was. So you have Yehovah, And Jehovah is, so then it says, and God said moreover unto Moses, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, the Lord, that's Jehovah, God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath sent me unto you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial unto all generations. So Jehovah is an archaic third person singular of the imperfective aspect of the verb to be. That is, he is, was, and will be. And so when the word Jehovah is mentioned, when I am is mentioned, the past, present, and the future is in Jehovah. The past, present, and the future is in I am. And so we've seen that many of the commentators are saying that the word Jehovah has the etymology in I am. So we see it has, the is, and the was, and the is to be there in the etymology of I am. So this is something that TurretinFan just seems to brush over this like it's just a nothing. But this is my main point. And now he's sort of moved on from there, and just looking at, the pile of manuscripts again, and just like, see, it says holy, and it's just sort of like, how can you deal, like, if I was him, I would do a whole show on I am, the etymology of I am, the etymology of Jehovah, and the past, present, and future in each. And if you've got a name, why isn't the full name there at Revelation 65 in the critical text or the majority text? But it's there in Beza, it's there in the King James, it's there in others, the full name. It's because there has been an amendment made there, and Beza had fixed it. And so, and as I mentioned before, what's happening is now he's getting on his programs, and he's saying, okay, we're going to listen to this other guy. He's listening to someone else, and he's saying, well, the Ethiopic doesn't have the reading of Beza there. Well, the Beatus of Banner doesn't have the, and so he's just saying none of it has the reading. And so when he's saying the reading, he's redefined terms. We've always, me and James White, I'm saying we, because this was what the debate was about. We've always talked about shall be. Okay. Now, Stephen Boyce jumps on the scene. He wants to talk about Lord. It's like, oh, okay, it's a side issue, but yeah, let's talk about it. TurretinFan's come on board. He wants to talk about Lord, but he wants to make sure we've got every aspect of that verse exactly as Beza has it, or exactly as the King James has it, or else he's going to say it's not the reading. So he's created a straw man argument. And what he's doing is he's producing evidence and saying, well, the Ethiopic doesn't have the reading of Beza. So you're left there going, are you talking about the singular word, esomenos, shall be? Oh, it's got that, but not the full read, not the where Beza substituted that for this. And it's like, who was saying that we need that? It's great to know that it doesn't have the full verse exactly as you want it, but my whole argument in the book wasn't that. So what it is, it's a misrepresentation of the evidence that I brought forth. Clearly, all the way through my website, all the way through my book, I'm like, shall be, even to the point where I'm talking about I am, that I am has been translated, shall be. And TurretinFan's like, well, I don't know why Nick keeps saying shall be, and it's like, go read back through my book where I talk about I am, and I mention about shall be, and I bring up people who he should really respect in the field, saying that shall be is a perfectly good example of a translation of the future form, but in context it is I am, but as a lexical word it is the future form, it's someone else. And so I bring that up, but in my first video he's fighting against that. So anyway, I think by now, if anyone's been watching all these videos, they know this. And so let's just listen to what TurretinFan's got to say in his, in the next 3 hours.
With respect to Beza's view of biblical text and the role of conjectural emendation in his textual criticism. Now keep in mind, Beza doesn't change the text lightly. He does change the text, though. Now, when he says numerous conjectures, we're going to see this is soft. This sounds like Beza made lots and lots of changes to the text, and we'll have to pull back that idea as we go through. I'm pretty sure there's some quotes that will clarify that. So his view on various conjectures changed over time. Kranz points out that there were various conjectures that made an appearance in only one edition. Some were introduced as late as his last edition. Some of them change over the years, additions and deletions. And if someone wants to study, as Kranz did, now someone has called Dr. White the guru of conjectural emendation. In fact, Jan Kranz is something of a guru of conjectural emendation. And I think he got his dissertation. I think this is a reworking of his dissertation materials. This book is. And he did study this. This is something he is a student of. He's a student of conjectural emendations and of their use and study today. And I would say his points here are important. Beza's mindset is not going to be exactly the same as that of previous scribes. But one nice thing is we have a lot of information about what Beza was thinking and how he came to the conclusions he came. And we have a lot of information about his materials that he had and the methods he used. And figuring out how he did his emendation of the text provides us in an interesting way with light into how scribes in previous generations may have edited their texts. Now, not all of them were doing it the same way Beza was, but at least it provides us with some insight about people doing this at a critical time in the history of the text. Critical in the sense that the text in printing was experiencing a lot of changes. Beza was right there at the center of some of them. So notice this, a few of his were actually included in the Greek text. So it says only a limited number of Beza's conjectures were adopted into the Latin translation, and an even smaller number into the Greek text. The annotations are virtually our only source for his reflections on the text critical problems of the Greek New Testament. I say virtually our only source because there are a few other places he talks about it. He does talk about that his use of manuscripts as background for conjectural emendation. And for Revelation 16:5, Beza's manuscript use is an issue of greater interest to us, greater than it was to Jan Kranz. He does point out this. His editions don't have a critical apparatus or even a rudimentary one. But he regularly mentions manuscript readings in his annotations, and the sources of these are relatively easy to identify. When manuscripts are cited individually, Beza refers to them, at least in a large part of his first edition, with ordinal numbers. These numbers generally coincide with the Greek numbers used as sigla in the marginal apparatus of Stephanus' third edition, and in most cases, the information provided by Beza agrees exactly with Stephanus' critical apparatus. The obvious connection between his annotations and Stephanus' apparatus is confirmed by annotations which mention our Stephanus manuscripts, and indirectly by a printer's note in the 1556 edition. In the 1556 preface, Beza himself actually states that he used Stephanus' collations directly. That is the information on which Stephanus drew for his critical apparatus. In a 1565 addition to the preface, Beza informs us that the collations were actually Henry Stephanus, who was probably asked to do them by his father. Some readings mentioned by Beza in the same way as the others are not found in Stephanus editions. They're probably derived from the collations. Perhaps Beza simply used the printed sources, Beza's third edition, and the Book of Collations in addition, but since the latter has been lost, nothing can be said with certainty. Some of the disparities between his marginal apparatus and the annotations may go back to the collation. So the errors or reduction of information, and thus to errors or reduction of information by Stephanus, others may be due to Beza's use of his materials. Beza often refers to readings derived from Stephanus in ways that suggest that he actually consulted the manuscripts himself. However, this impression is deceptive, at least in the case of Stephanus manuscripts, as is demonstrated by a noticeable change between Beza's first edition and the second edition. In the first, readings are most referred to with expressions such as "it is read" and "it was written." When the annotations are edited for the second edition, many of these expressions are changed to "I read," "we find written," and the like. It's just a matter of style. So on the one hand, he says deceptive, that he means that the impression is deceptive, not that Beza is deceptive. But the point is this. Beza had access to Stephanus' collation, and he actively cited it, and his citation, which doesn't include an apparatus, he doesn't provide his own apparatus. When he cites to manuscripts, he just cites to the ones in the order Stephanus provided them, which shows us that he's working from Stephanus' collation. And he even says he is, So we know that.
And so if you were to go through Beza's material yourself, you would probably find a whole bunch of information that Kranz doesn't put in here. And he's mentioned that the whole reason, because as soon as someone talks about Henry Stephanus and his collations, usually this is where people want to insert the funny circus music starts, and people want to insert the anecdote. The Benny Hill sort of, someone slapping a bald head, and people, dwarves running around, and all this sort of stuff. It's like it just becomes one of those James White funny shows that he does. Usually in his debates, he brings up these type of strange things, and so Jan Kranz is pushing for this this collation to be the place where, if anything's unexplained, well, we all know that Henry Stephanus, when he was 18, did these collations, didn't know what he was doing, had no idea, and his father probably pushed him into it, and then after doing these collations, Beza just blindly followed them, slavishly following these collations, and there was probably lots of errors in them. And so when you read through Jan Kranz's material, when he talks about Erasmus, so say the Reuchlin manuscript of the Book of Revelation that he had, he will emphasize that Erasmus never worked on the text himself. He just got one of his friends to do it, because then there's another layer of error that can be added. And so there's always, with Kranz, there's always layer upon layer upon layer, because I'm so used to listening to Bart Ehrman. This is what Bart Ehrman does. But he does this of the Gospels, and he's doing this of Paul, and how could he have written this, because he would have got a friend to write it, because he was an ignorant fisherman, and or talking about Peter, and just these type of things which he's got set in concrete in his own mind, and in his explanation of how the Gospels came to be, where to Bible believing people, we look at it and go, no, like he sees that the Gospels not having, this is written by Matthew or whatever at the beginning, is something that goes against the Gospels. But you listen to apologists and they're like, or actually it's usually the counterfeit ones say, hi, I'm Thomas, or I'm Judas, and they mention these names, and they're all, most of the ancient works didn't start out with this is written by so and so. But I actually believe that when it says the Gospel of Matthew, it was there. It's very old. And just while we're on that, I'll just quickly bring that up. If we actually go to my website, I was actually pointing this out to Stephen Boyce. I don't know if the critical text guys must just assume that there was no names, but I was actually pointing this out to Stephen Boyce on one of his earlier programs, but then it's sort of become like, oh, you're a stalker, so I just didn't bother. But so when we go to Matthew 1, now actually I've got title here. It's quite interesting when you go through this. Like, look at this. It says Evangelion Katamatheon, and dated to the 2nd or 3rd century. I mean, this is early. This is papyrus number 4. That's very early. And so your papyrus 4 origin. So he talks about it's Matthew. So I'm just not sure why they go that route, but I guess because when you're looking at Bart Ehrman, he's only looking at the critical text stuff. He's not going to, come against King James stuff, because most people go, well, that's King James kooky stuff. Why are you going with that? So he knows where his money's at with the critical text guys, and they're going to buy into his stuff and think about it. Go, oh, he's got a good point there, and he's got a contradiction there. Let's try and fight against it, or let's make an apologetic against it, or whatever they're doing. But you can clearly see P4's got this, and it's clearly part of my Bible anyway. But I just find that Jan Kranz, he will do this all the way through his book with something like Erasmus, saying, like I was saying before, Erasmus, or when he had this manuscript, he didn't, go through it and extract the text from, extract the Greek scriptures from the commentary. He got someone else to do it. So that person made mistakes. They wrote out their own edition. Then they gave it to Erasmus, and Erasmus, how could he have known if they made mistakes or not, and just, he creates that layer of error just out of thin air, or sometimes just by the way he spins a word. So it will say something like, Erasmus will say, oh, we had it extrapolated from the manuscript. It's like, oh no, see, he's saying that he had someone else do it. And when you read into it, and when you read Erika Rummel's material, it's not saying that, but he's once puts that type of spin on it, or every step of the way, because what he wants, his ideal type of scenario is, Erasmus had a group of guys, they were working for him, and they were just a bunch of bozo idiots who were doing work for him, but filled with errors. The printer was rushing around, rush to print, that type of anecdote, and he's promising that he's going to put the comma in later on and all this sort of stuff. But at the moment, they're just slipping on banana peels. They're just, running around the print shop with the wrong numbers on the top of each page and all the rest of it, and falling over themselves. And then, Erasmus is so busy and so flummoxed with everything else that's happening in his life that he's just like, and he's not really focused on the Greek. He doesn't really care much about this is James White sort of stuff. He only really cares about the Latin. So it's like an afterthought anyway. And the Book of Revelation, he doesn't even believe John wrote it. And so that's what Jan Kranz says in his book with the mistranslation of Olam. Instead of reading Erika Rummel's one where the Greeks doubted who wrote the Book of Revelation. Oh, it's Erasmus. He doubted that, and so it's another layer of. So there's just, by the time you get to what Erasmus actually says, you've got 15 layers of junk. And so this is the problem. Now TurretinFan's read through my stuff. He's like, oh, I'll go to Jan Kranz, and just getting all this junk. And I just don't think he has the goods to see through a charlatan like Jan Kranz, where I've gone through Jan Kranz's material and I'm like, okay, that's scholarly, but Bart Ehrman is scholarly. It's scholarly deception. And I can see the same type of arguments that Bart Ehrman would bring up in Jan Kranz's material. And so just focus, getting something that's so microscopic, it's like, well, is it true or is it not? But then just running with it. It's like, just put it on the blackboard, the Galatians, let's just run with that. Let's make that the biggest thing. And, so I'll be debating on the internet with people and they're like, oh, how come you believe what a 18-year-old kid did? It's like, where are you getting this? Henry Stephanus was 18. His dad forced him to make these manuscripts, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you start to hear that, and then you start to hear the dribble on the Alpha Omega YouTube site, and then it just becomes gospel. And so, anyway.
That much. What we should probably do at this point is kind of set out of our minds any idea of Beza surrounded by 10,000 million manuscripts, going through all these manuscripts to try to find readings.
See? Exactly. What we've got to do is get out of our mind anything else and just run with what Jan Kranz has said. And so, worst case scenario, this is for TurretinFan, for him having discernment, for him having an unbiased opinion, This sort of material is just poison. And the problem is, TurretinFan's already got flammable material there. The fiery darts of the Wicked One are just flying over the fence towards him. And he's just like, yeah, I think I'll believe that. I think I'll actually believe these type of anecdotes. You know, Erasmus was just a buffoon who didn't really believe the Book of Revelation was even part of it, you know, the canon and all this sort of stuff. And so you just end up with a mess. And unfortunately, I just think TurretinFan's just going to get burnt up by this sort of stuff. And which is a bit of a shame, because he's learnt all the stuff from me, a whole bunch of stuff from me, which I would see as Bible believing criticism, even though I'm just a layman. Jan Kranz, he's a scholar. He's probably, you know, being born with a silver spoon in his mouth, learnt Latin, learned Greek, and he's studying these things. And you know, if you ever just read through his material, it's like, do you ever picture this guy, you know, going out and just handing out tracts and preaching and street preaching, or you just don't get that feeling that he's really full on or, you know, saved at all. You sort of get more so the picture that, you know, he's just living like any other person, but he has this job of going through Beezer and a bit like, you know, Tommy Wasserman. You look at these guys and they're smart guys, but he's hanging around with Jennifer Knust, you know, and if you know anything about her, LBGT community, you know, she's the principal editor of the NASB updated edition, and so Kranz is hanging around all these strange and weird and bizarre people as well, and what can you do? People wander into this stuff, and you're just like, oh well, you know, it's like watching someone just go into Charles Darwin material and going, yeah, I'm seeing that. I don't see any evidence for young Earth creationism. And you're just sort of going, oh well, that's a shame. You know, it would have been great for, you know, TurretinFan to go, well, the I am there is a past, present, and future. Jehovah is past, present, future. The Bible says, you know, the one which art, was, and shall be. It's the name, it's expansion of the name of Jehovah. Wow, and he's got a point here. So, no, not even an inch, not even a scintilla of, you know, of that could be evidence, let alone, you know, anything with the future reading. And it's just a mistranslation now. And it's just, it's like, oh, well, you know, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make it drink. You can lead a scholar to knowledge, but you can't make him think.
That's not Beza's primary focus. It's not even his secondary focus. He does sometimes consult manuscripts, physical manuscripts. And the two that he does are Codex Bezae and Codex Claromontus, neither of which have revelation. So it doesn't appear that he has any of his own manuscripts for revelation, at least none that he's identified and none that we can identify from his writings. Now that's significant when it comes to this one note at Revelation 16:5, but we'll come back to that in a minute, or maybe one.
And another thing is just the constant, well, I haven't found anything with him speaking about, you know, some manuscript or saying this and saying that, so he mustn't have used anything else, you know. And so, you know, Jan Kranz has a list of, well, this is what he used. I mean, even the whole concept of, you know, Jan Kranz is that he treats the Complutensian Polyglot as a manuscript. Well, do you know anything about the Complutensian Polyglot? And I mentioned this in my last video. It's like, if you knew about the Complutensian Polyglot, you would say, yes, it's a representation of multiple manuscripts. And so, you know, when you see Lord there, because I think that's what I looked up last time, you would say, okay, well, the manuscripts that they had Lord in it. It's very simple. They were putting in Greek readings, okay? If it wasn't in there, they were leaving it out. Now, Erasmus, he was using Greek readings as well. If it wasn't in the Greek, he was leaving it out. And so there you've got two witnesses to a whole bunch of other manuscripts. And so you can't just dismiss that. It's like if someone was to do a critical apparatus and they were using, Westcott and Hort text and said, well, they had this reading, and, knowing that that's a representation of a whole bunch of manuscripts. Anyway, so we've got this definitive list by Wettstein, because he just knew everything.
I'll come back to it in a minute. I don't know. The footnotes are interesting. A footnote at page 213 says, Beza says that Wettstein says that Beza's use of Stephanus material is very disgraceful. And he says it's because Beza exaggerates the number of manuscripts.
So Wettstein, he says Beza exaggerates the number of manuscripts. So TurretinFan's running with this because it's it goes with his story. So, let's believe this, And that, at the end of the day, when it comes down to what Kranz thinks of Beza and Erasmus, and also James White, you just left there going, well, these, James White will do a whole program and say, oh, Beza was just a fool, and Erasmus, he was deeply compromised and all this sort of stuff. And you just there going, okay, well, and he's holding up Jan Kranz's book saying, this is where I got it from. And so now we're seeing TurretinFan jumping in and with all this mess. And instead of just taking them at their word, it's taking Wettstein at his word. And I'm pretty sure Wettstein was 150 years later.
Treats the Complutensian edition as a manuscript, which is just a glaring mistake.
So you see now, instead of Beza is using a certain number to say, okay, this is a Complutensian reading, which is a printed representation of a whole bunch of manuscripts that we don't know about from the Vatican, because they've gone through the Complutensian manuscripts, and it's like there was a whole bunch of them, but they still find readings that they can't match them up with the manuscripts that are there. So that those manuscripts are no longer in existence. And so, but there's nothing deceptive. If I was to say, okay, well, this is in this manuscript, that's in that manuscript. Okay, this is the King James reading, or this is Beza's reading, or that's all he was doing. But Wettstein makes out that it's some sort of deceptive thing. TurretinFan all of a sudden is saying, oh, that's clearly a mistake. And so he's already on board. He's already bought the car. He's driving off with it. And it's like, well, what can I do? He's got himself a lemon here. It's a tragedy to see people go down this route because, this type of, modern day Enlightenment-based text criticism just leads people to Bart Ehrman land. But that's what we're seeing.
But probably demonstrates that he didn't get the manuscripts that the Stephanus was working from, otherwise he would make the mistake.
See, he's making up his own conclusions. You know what I mean? He knows. If I was to get TurretinFan live right now and say, "What do you know about the Complutensian Polyglot? What do you know about the manuscripts? What do you know about anything about that edition? And what do you know about what Beza wrote about it?" Well, I only know it through Jan Kranz's book. He's just developed a huge bias against Beza, looking for anything. Beza's made a mistake here. Beza's doing this here. Oh, yep, I'll just believe that. I mean, I wouldn't even believe this from a corrupt politician, because when you, at least if you're looking at something like politics, if you're going to be a proper critic, you have to have your facts straight. You can't just dislike someone and just make up stories about them. You have to have your facts right. And you have to know, and you have to realize that there's probably 50 other people slandering these guys, and you have to pick out what's slander and what's not. TurretinFan's not doing that at all. He's just swallowing this. Wettstein said it. I'm believing this, and not only that, I'm running with my own little narrative. So, he treats the Complutensian edition as one of Stephanus's manuscripts. Well, Stephanus, one of his numbers is the Complutensian polyglot. So he did the same thing. So are we going to say that Stephanus is a bozo as well? Or are we going to say that perhaps you don't know much about how they formulated their text, and you need to actually learn about that to make an informed decision about whether these guys are just bozos who make these type of mistakes or not? Then you can look at Wettstein and you could look at Kranz and go, well, why are they actually saying this type of thing? Because once you understand that what they're saying here is ridiculous, then you go, well, why are they saying these type of things? Oh, they're just being scholars. They're just historians. James White will say that. They're just historians. They're neutral. No. These guys are so anti-TR. Wettstein, wants to overthrow the... I mean, so many people wanted to overthrow the TR before Westcott and Hort, and finally, they overthrew it in the academy, But TurretinFan doesn't seem to realize how, I guess, critical text people are frothing at the mouth to come against the Textus Receptus and the King James. Okay. I've found this firsthand. I'm running the page Textus Receptus. Okay. So I've become a bit of a lightning rod for a lot of things that happen. And I get thrown into all sorts of camps. Mark Ward will throw me in under the bus somewhere, and James White will throw me under the bus somewhere, and young Kranz will say this, and I've talked with all these people, and I've seen them use logic, use good argumentation, have arguments that are not fallacious. They're good, sound arguments in other areas. But then when it comes to the Textus Receptus, they throw all of that out, and they are frothing at the mouth, trying to discredit the Textus Receptus, trying to discredit people who follow the King James, trying to discredit Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza are just idiots and bozos, and but it's like they're on a leash too, because they can't just come out and just say, hey, Nick says you're a loser moron. I mean, James White might say that on his show and get away with it. But someone like Mark Ward will be way more passive-aggressive and just say, I've never met a King James onlyist who uses their brain, like my friend here, Ryan, or, it's like, oh, okay, so we're all dimwits. But it's, yeah.
He acts as if each manuscript contains the entire New Testament. That is another part.
He presents the readings as if himself consulted the manuscripts. So they're saying that he didn't. Now they're saying specifically he didn't consult the manuscripts, and they got no proof of that. I mean, you look at the manuscripts that he had, Codex D, like 5th century manuscript. It's named after him, but apparently he didn't have any other manuscripts. That the main guy in Geneva, he just had no interest in manuscripts. You know what I mean? This is a conclusion. These guys they want this to be true.
Problem. Stephanus doesn't make clear the negative readings, so.
So because scholars today can't recognize whether marginal reading or whatever, it's like, oh, we're putting that there because we think it's the reading that should be accepted or should be rejected or whatever. That means Beza had no idea. You know what I mean? How amazing is this? Like, and I'm not exaggerating at all. I just think this through. Stephanus handed the baton to Beza. Okay, they would have known each other. Beza's doing a whole, set of annotations on the Textus Receptus. Robert Stephanus was the one who did the Textus Receptus. But they never talked about how are you reading this? What marginal note are you putting these marginal notes in there for positive, for negative? Never found that out. Just I guess Beza was just smoking a crack pipe down by the river, and never figured those things out. Even though the guy, the scholarly guy who's handing this mantle to him, Elisha type of thing, but he had no idea what was really going on. He was just, I guess he was smoking pipes with Henry Stephanus, when he was 18. Him and Beza were getting on it, smoking pot down by the river.
Beza just assumes that if there's nothing mentioned, that all the manuscripts, all 17 manuscripts that Stephanus was working from, must have the reading.
And this is so exhausting to listen to. He acts as if each manuscript contains the entire New Testament. Like, can you believe this? Anyway, but I could do 50 videos just on this list. Prove every one of them wrong, but it's not going to change anything. I don't think anything that I say now changes anything that TurretinFan would believe. He's set in his ways. He's going to believe what he wants to believe. Okay. And he's just jumping down the critical text hole and just giggling like, yeah, well, I agree with these guys. It's just, I'm just watching it going, oh, that's a real shame. Anyway, I did have hope that you would come out of this mess. But all of these things are just are insane. Like, in all honesty, that these things, you don't have to even know that much about all this to just go, well, ask the question. Is he actually asking a question? Where are you getting this information from?
He presents Stephanus' manuscript of Beta as his own codex and his own codex.
Okay, so I'll just read this one. He mistakes the absence of a variant reading in Stephanus' collations for proof that all manuscripts go with the edited text. Like, this is just amazing. Okay.
Beza has two witnesses, and he cites readings without Stephanus' sigla. Interestingly, Kranz pushes back on this one point of manuscript B and Codex Bezae, pushes back at some point. But anyway, what about the number of manuscripts? There's been some discussion and confusion about the exact number that he may have used. This comes from his own statements. At one place, he uses the number 25, talking about Vala's, Lefebvre's, and Erasmus's annotations. Let's see, I get some comments. Patrick says he's done research on Nick Sayers and says he's not even a Calvinist. No, Nick is not a Calvinist. He's contra-Calvinistic. He doesn't talk a lot about it. That's not his focus, but he does have at least one video out there that's critical of Calvinistic views. So not a Calvinist, but anyway, moving on. So in addition to all this is a comment from me. It says, in addition to all of this came a copy from the library of our Stephanus, collated as accurately as possible with some 25 manuscript codices, and almost all the printed ones. In the preface to the second edition, the number is not changed, but the information is more precise. In addition to all this came a copy from the library of our Stephanus, collated by Henry Stephanus, his son and heir of his father's assiduity, as accurately as possible, with some 25 manuscript codices and almost all the printed ones. These words with the number 25 are maintained without changes in the third edition. And there is, however, another small preface where he enumerates new material used for the revision. And here again, now the number 17 is given. 17 Greek books cited by Robert Stephanus. In the fourth edition, the longer one is retained with the number 25, and the other was 17. And then in the fifth, only one number is mentioned, namely 19. So you can see why there's some confusion.
So instead of like TurretinFan thinking, well, there's got to be an explanation for this, and half the time it can just come out of just rereading things. Okay, because sometimes these scholars, they can't exactly just come out and just lie outright. It's the way that certain material is presented in a certain way that makes you think it's saying something when it actually really isn't. It's like, TurretinFan was like, oh, I found this saying of Beza that I will never use any conjectures ever. I'll always have to have a manuscript to make any type of conjecture or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, that goes against everything that James White's been teaching about Beza for the last 35 years. But it says these words, which number 25 are maintained without changes in the preface to the third edition, okay, which, however, also contains another smaller preface in which Beza enumerates the new material used for the revision. Here, the number 17 is given. We collated these books of the New Covenant, again with the various readings from the 17 Greek books cited by Robert Stephanus. But doesn't he say that he had manuscripts, but also printed ones? So wouldn't that add up to the 25? In the fourth edition, 1589, the longer preface is retained with the number 25, as well as the other preface with its number 17. But the new preface to the fifth, 1598, only one number is mentioned, namely 19. Well, it is already 42 years ago, my Christian reader, that I undertook to correct the Latin translation of the New Testament after collation of the Greek text, with as many as 19 very old manuscripts and many printed books from everywhere. And so instead of TurretinFan, reading through this and go, okay, well, let's look at the context of all this. Let's think about all this. It's just young Krantz wants to put it in. Look, he's contradicting himself here, here, and here, and here. Well, they're different editions. And so clearly he's talking about he got stuff from Robert Stephanus. But then it's like, oh, no, Robert Stephanus, he gave it to Henry Stephanus to do, but it's under Robert Stephanus's name and all this, the other stuff that he's twisted earlier. So you have to believe that first, and then you can go through this and go, oh, well, they're just, the Three Stooges again, story. Get the circus music out. See, they're making all these mistakes. Instead of going through, most of the time, when you go through this type of material, this type of stuff, and see, the thing is, if I actually went, okay, I'm going to make this my main thing, which sometimes I do. Like say with James White, he's like, Theodore Beza, as if he knew about the Ethiopic. I'm like, well, it's not what I said. I just said it's got the reading. But I think perhaps he did. He knew his stuff, and so read into it. And I was like, he knew Tremellius. That case closed, but that's not good enough for Turretin. So he kept pushing to the end now, where it's like there was a guy doing Ethiopic alphabet, the Ethiopic alphabet, and call it Indianic, not Indian, Indianic. But and Theodore Beza was recognizing him as like a hero of the faith sort of thing, and it's like, well, he wrote this book about the Ethiopic, and so, and then Charles Stephanus, the son of Robert. So you got Henry here, you got Robert, and then you got Charles. He wrote a book on the Ethiopian. It just narrows right down to the point where you're just like, yeah, what do you need? A neon sign with these, or footage, for photographic proof. He had a Bible sitting on his shelf. It wouldn't surprise me that there is that they find an Ethiopic Bible in Geneva. That would just be like, yeah, like I would think that they would have multiple language editions in Geneva. And the thing is, if I made this my thing, okay, just so I thought, well, I've got I've got 15 days off. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to read through every one of Henry Stephanus's prefaces. I'm going to go through every one of Robert Stephanus' prefaces. We're going to go through every one of Beza's prefaces. We're going to go through and we're going to make sure that all these things match up, all the numbers match up. I can guarantee you that it would, well, 90 I'm 98% sure that it would just all back up, because every time that I do that, and I take time out to do that, it's usually the critical text guys end up with egg on their face. When I go to critique this book, when he says it's not in the Ethiopic, it's not in this, it's not in that, and it's like, well, there it is, you know. No one's ever seen this reading before. Well, there it is. Yeah, TurretinFan has to change it to the whole scripture has to be, you know, that not the shall be. But what would happen if I did that? They would just make up another story. So this is what seems to be happening. Instead of organically people wanting to know truth and wanting to grow and wanting to go to the source material. So this isn't going to the source material. This is going to Jan Kranz, who's putting his spin on source material. Okay, going to source material is TurretinFan going through and looking all these up and making sure that they're translated properly, for starters, making sure that there's no typos. I mean, I've found typos in Scrivener's Textus Receptus, and most people have no idea that, you know, they're like, 190, you know, differences between that and Beza, and I've found where he's actually seen a typo and not known it's a typo, and he's mentioning a whole thing on it. It's part of his 190 list. And he's a good scholar, you know what I mean? But he's flawed in many ways. I think Jan Kranz is flawed, and I believe he's deliberately deceptive. I think I pointed that out with my Olam example. But he's given the places here. So all these can be double checked. And so that's where I would go through, double check all these, make sure that he's talking about the same thing. Because what I found, these scholars are biased, and many times these scholars are wrong. And so that's why it's sort of sad in a way to see TurretinFan just giggling along with all this and going, yeah, I found some answers. That, you know, this conveniently comes against the argumentation that we've been looking at.
By the 5th edition, he's up to 19, down from 25, up from 17. But it seems to make sense that it's the 17 plus Beza plus Codex Clarimontis. But we'll see, and he's counting Beza twice, not on purpose, but unconsciously. So there's some citation for the material and so forth. Now, as far as his use of the critical edition of Stephanus, this is at page 241. This was an interesting point. He says, Beza belonged to the first generation of critics who used some kind of critical edition, like as a reference material. It seems that almost everything that can go wrong did go wrong. Yeah.
And you're going to believe almost everything that can go wrong did go wrong. And TurretinFan, you really think that this is a scholarly critique? You're going to go with this? I mean, imagine if the tables were turned, okay, and you were debating, I don't know, who follows Gail Ripplinger anyway. Hardly anyone does. But just say I was, you know, from some sort of, you know, King James only group. I follow Ripplinger. And I'm like, well, when it came to Westcott and Hort, everything that can go wrong did go wrong. Okay. It's like you just go, what are you talking about? Like, you know, he's completely relying on Wettstein here. As if Wettstein knows everything about Beza. Wettstein, almost everything he says about Erasmus, about Beza, about the reformers is strange, weird. It's not what we know historically, but it's a good yarn. It's a great story. And what I find is these text critics, they gravitate towards these anecdotes. They run with them because they know how much damage it does and how many people will believe it. It's like these guys are like the Dan Browns of that era. They just say a whole bunch of stuff, and next thing you know, everyone's parroting it, and they get Dan Browned. Well, I'm watching in real time TurretinFan get wet-steined. And it's not a pretty picture.
Unfortunately, that's true. But things can go wrong, and they do. Wetstein points out a common vice in Beza's annotations, especially he didn't understand the negative apparatus point that I mentioned before, and he didn't consider the possibility that the manuscript may be defective or have yet another variant reading. So sometimes when you're doing a very limited collation, and people.
Okay, so it says, Wetstein points out that a common vice in Beza's annotations, namely that he did not perceive the difficulties with the negative apparatus, as it is called nowadays. He often naively assumed that the manuscripts were not mentioned as supporting a reading, supported the text itself, and did not consider the possibility that a manuscript may be defective or may have yet another variant reading. As can be expected, he also underestimated the selectivity of Stephanus's apparatus. Coupled with his failure to recognize that each of Stephanus's sources, except the Competency Polyglot, actually covers only part of the New Testament. Like, as if, like, it grates against my spirit to accuse Beza of being so stupid. It grates against my spirit to say that someone is so utterly dumb that he's just there like, okay, what's this manuscript? Okay, oh, it's the Gospels. And then just writing down like, I think it's got every book in the Bible in that one. Okay, move on. What's the next one? Just like he's intellectually disabled. Like, have you ever known anyone to make that mistake? Like even on Facebook, or maybe someone who's just become a Christian, or someone who's just like following Bart Ehrman, has no idea and just wants to slap and run in a post and just says, oh, it's not in the Book of Revelation. So and sometimes people make a mistake. You're like, okay, well, that doesn't have the Book of Revelation. So you'll hear people say, oh, Vaticanus Sinaiticus, and like I think even Josh Gibbs, he was saying Vaticanus Sinaiticus, and it's like, well, actually, Sinaiticus has the Book of Revelation. Vaticanus, that was not the section was not written there in it was supposedly rewritten for the Council of Florence, that section, but most scholars recognize that it only went up to the Book of Hebrews. So you might have someone who's a bit of a novice make that mistake. So this is the thing. It's like, how low a view has TurretinFan got of Beza to believe this type of rubbish? I mean, listen again. Coupled with his failure to recognize that each of Stephanus's sources, except for the Competency Polyglot, actually covers only part of the New Testament. That's why I read through Crowns and just went, Bart Ehrman, he's a Bart Ehrman puppet, just saying whatever he wants, but not just saying whatever he wants, discrediting true scholars of that era and making them out to be bozos. And what a shame. I wonder if he would do a scathing critique on Carlo Martini or Westcott and Hort or George Van Smith or Tommy Wasserman, doesn't believe in hell.
People do this even today. I've seen people making this mistake. Even people I respect have made this kind of mistake, that if they don't see it in the Nestle Island 28 apparatus, they just assume that either all the manuscripts read that way or there isn't any other textual variant there. So this problem came up because there's a place where the King James Version has a reading that was introduced by Erasmus on the basis of one Greek text that Erasmus had. But since none of the other Greek texts have that reading, this is the oikonomia versus koinonia issue that we talked about previously. Anyway, so Erasmus had introduced it. However, the one Greek manuscript that he has is such a minor and insignificant witness to the text that it wasn't even mentioned in some of the critical apparatus things. such that people who saw it assumed that there weren't any Greek.
James White. But so the thing is, you're projecting the level of James White scholarship onto Erasmus and onto Beza, and it's like there's James White would be like 1.5% of Beza. I mean, Beza could get a Latin text and read it fluently, a Hebrew text, read it fluently, a Greek text, read it fluently. James White's an alpha, beta. He even says that the people who tricked, or Erasmus tricked himself with the Align edition. If you've ever watched him do a recent debate, he says it was the Align brothers. Like, usually it's the Elzeva brothers, and it was uncle and nephew anyway. And that's like 100 years later. It's the Aldine family from Aldus Manutius, like the most famous printer of Greek books of that era. So it's sort of like, saying, so instead of saying Michelangelo, you're saying Michelangelo. Michelangelo. It's like a Donatello or Michelangelo. Who are you talking about? And James White's made up this Aline brothers for Erasmus. Like, it's sort of sad to watch it, but that's the level of James White scholarship. I'm not having a go at him. He's thinking and doing lots of different things. Okay, if he was focused on this stuff and this stuff only, I think he could be up to Jan Kranz's level on this, and understand these things and know them. But he just wants sound bites and win a debate. But you can't project onto Beza the type of lousy scholarship that's in this generation.
Witnesses to that reading. But in fact, there was at least one, maybe even a second one, that had such a reading. Now, it's extreme minority. It's not a viable reading, but it's actually more of a reading than we have here in Revelation 16:5, where there's 0 Greek manuscripts that support the reading. So in some ways, this is a better test case for that. But anyway, so the point is, we could still run into this problem today. That's something that can go wrong and does go wrong, and it did go wrong for Beza as well. He also underestimated.
So TurretinFan has decided that this is true. Whatever went wrong, whatever could have gone wrong, did go wrong. And that's a huge, broad statement. And so people from James White, they get recommended to this book. They read through this and they think Beza is just a bozo. He didn't know much, did he? What an idiot. But then TurretinFan will be like, I'm not saying he's an idiot, and I'm not saying this and that. Inadvertently, you are. Just in believing this and not even second guessing, or you're questioning these sources. Like, do you know who Wettstein is? You know who Bengal is? Do you know who Griesbach is? Do you know what was being said by these people? But, you see some scholars supporting it. Text critic.
The selectivity of the apparatus. So if he didn't see a textual variant mentioned, he just assumed there isn't a textual variation. And he failed to recognize that each of the sources doesn't cover the whole New Testament. He kind of seemed to assume that they all were complete New Testaments. It's an easy mistake for a kind of a rookie mistake. Beza is, an important.
Beza's making a rookie mistake. I think at the back of TurretinFan's mind, he's probably hearing my voice going, "Are you being real? Is this real?"
Scholar, not totally naive rookie, and great at languages, great at Greek and Latin, but still, able to
make Wettstein, he knows everything about the guy apparently.
Make mistakes. It says, it does not seem useful or necessary to assume that Beza willfully distorted text critical facts. I agree with Kranz on this point. We don't have to assume the worst, we can just assume the best. It's easier to just say he didn't quite understand. A great example is the Johannine Hama.
He's quoting Edward Gibbon, who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, it's like quoting, Jordan Peterson or something. It's like, Edward Gibbon, who just come against a comma. I mean, so many people wrote books against Gibbon of that era, but Kranz, he's not going to go there because Kranz and the other guys, they were the ones who sponsor Grantley MacDonald. And, Grantley MacDonald's been on the Textus Receptus Academy. He wrote his PhD dissertation under these guys. I think it was in 2016 or something, maybe earlier, where he brought out the issues of Erasmus and Beza, and he goes through like the history of the comma, and then that became like a book, Erasmus and early European history or something like that. And so anyway, he touches on a lot of things, but he's got the same type of spin. It's just always spun in a certain way. And he was sponsored by these guys. Now, when I've talked to Grantley MacDonald on the Textus Receptus Academy, I said, so Grantley, because he grew up in Melbourne and he's born, I think, the same year that I was in Melbourne. So, he's a fellow Aussie. And I said, so you reject all religions as dangerous, and especially fundamentalist religions. So you would see that, someone who really believes in the Bible and really, follows, wants to pray and pray with their family and all that is dangerous. He's like, absolutely. And so he is a full atheist. And these guys sponsor him to write a book against 1 John 5:7. And if you can't see that these guys just have a bias against the Textus Receptus readings, I can see it clearly. I guess if you are in the realm of your defending young earth creationism against evolutionism, you're constantly confronted with certain argumentation. And you can see people trying to, twist things and trying to, look at the stats and the facts differently. And that's what I see with these guys. These guys will use atheists, they'll use non-believers, they'll do whatever it takes to dethrone the Textus Receptus. I mean, to me, this type of fanaticism against the TR, to me, I think it's a demonic thing. Because Jehovah's Witnesses have the same spirit. I know people who are Jehovah's Witnesses, have contact with them, at sometimes in periods of my life every day. And I brought up the comma. They have the same argumentation. Oh, the manuscript evidence, blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, what about the Latin? 95% of Latin. Don't want to talk about it. Oh, okay. What about the grammatical issues? Don't want to talk about it. Just want to talk about the Greek manuscripts, But then why are they majority text there when then hardly ever majority text anywhere else? Any other variant that they want to promote? And it's exactly the same thing. And I'm like, one of the things was, and I'll just throw this out there. When I was first a Christian, I had the Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door about 100 times in the first year of my Christianity. So they must have had written on their book, like, go and see this guy, on their local, that they all had like the book, where it's like they write down the address and like, no, this guy's an apostate or this guy's whatever. So I was a new Christian. So I was asking questions, looking for things, and they're giving me watchtowers. I had the Greek interlinear Bible, the Kingdom interlinear, the KIT. I had the New World Translation. I had Watchtower magazines against the Trinity, all sorts of stuff, all around the house. I'm reading through it, studying it, going through it, and what I realized, I was like, these guys have a different Bible, and so I started going down that route because we used to use the New King James as a church. So for some reason, I just thought New King James is an update of the Old King James. I didn't know there was so much difference. So I started to come against their teachings and things like that, and pointing out that their Bible changes things. I was like, your Bible says this, but our Bible says that. And like even 1 John 5:7, going through that and just showing the differences. But what I didn't realize was inadvertently, because as a church, we all read the New King James. We didn't really have a problem with it. And so we rarely would ever go to the NIV or any of these other translations. And if a pastor did, it was like, oh, okay. A lot of the time, people had that Mark Ward type of thing where it's like, oh, if you've got 3 or 4 Bible translations, it saves you learning Greek because you can just read through them and they'll have a different perspective on it. And so that's what we thought, I'm talking about back in like 1995, 1996, a long time ago. And so I didn't realize that me studying all this stuff, looking into the Interlinear Kingdom translation, looking at their Bible and how it's translated, and I'm pointing out that it's different. It says, NRK en hologos, kai hologos en proston theon, kai theos en hologos. It doesn't say a God there. And I'm pointing out that in their translation it says a God, and in the Kingdom Interlinear it's contradicting they actually have the translation of the English there, and it doesn't say a God, it says God. I'm like, what are you guys going to do with that? And I'm pointing those sort of things out there. And I didn't realize that when, like, a few years later, I'm running into Christians and they're like, I read the New American Standard, and I read the NIV, and I read all this other stuff. And I'm like, so I'm looking into these things going, I actually know all about this because of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So most of this type of argumentation, I've already got in the back of my mind, that this is the type of thing the Jehovah's Witnesses love. And oftentimes, like even when I was going through the Revelation 16:5 material, the Jehovah's Witnesses are obsessed with the name Jehovah. So we were showing my book to Jehovah's Witnesses to prove that Jesus is Jehovah, because of the Triadic declarations, because of the etymology, because of the name Jehovah, is the etymology of I am, the past, the present, and future, looking at who was and is and is to come, and then who was and is and shall be, and showing all that sort of stuff. And so he's talking about Jesus, and they're like, spinning out at that. But I'm seeing that, Edward Gibbon, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. I mean, Grantley MacDonald, these Jan Kranz, who else was it? He recently passed away. It was Henk de Jong. They sponsored Grantley MacDonald to do that book against 1 John 5:7. And he's an atheist and says that fundamentalist Christians are just as dangerous as jihadis. And if you forbid women to have the rights to have an abortion, you're a crazy fundamentalist. He says this in the beginning of his book that they helped publish. And so it's like, man, you are digging into the wells of infidelity here. And, if I don't know if you just don't want to see it, or you can't see it, or to me it's like, yeah, this is just another, Jan Kranz is just another guy who's a Bart Ehrman with a little bit more of a Christian tinge. He's just keeping his mouth shut to be on the Christian side. I don't even know if he's doing that. I mean, look at Tommy Wasserman. Look at Jennifer Knust. She'll say that the Bible never speaks against homosexuality, never even mentions homosexuality. So same-sex relationships are fine. That's Jennifer Knust. Co-wrote a book with Tommy Wasserman, the go-to book that James White points to for, cast the first stone for the Pericope Adultera. Friends with Kranz. If you just type in Jan Kranz, Jennifer Knust, you'll find photos of these guys all lined up at the SBL conference, taking photos with Bart Ehrman. And you want me to just all of a sudden believe this? You know what I mean? Like, as if this is going to come against my position, like James White, saying, "Oh, this is the one-volume destruction of the Textus Receptus." Yeah, I guess most Enlightenment stuff, will come against the TR. Jehovah's Witness stuff does as well. I find most enemies of God will go down this route. Now, I know there are cults that use the King James. I know there's weirdos every now and then, like Stephen Anderson, who use the King James and things like that. But at the end of the day, I believe there is a demonic spirit. I remember reading Dave Cloud's material, and, me and Dave Cloud don't see eye to eye on everything. He actually said I was a heretic. And because I said, can I use your material on my website, And he just, because I'm a continuationist, he was like, you're a heretic, straight out. I can't have anything to do with you, separation, and just never heard from him again. So, okay. But he said a very interesting thing. He said when he went to the British Museum, he was looking at Codex Sinaiticus, and then a busload of people turned up, and they were all coming to see Codex Sinaiticus. And he asked his guide, he said, who are these people? And he said, these are the Jehovah's Witnesses. They come to see Codex Sinaiticus. And about, a few weeks ago, I was talking to a Jehovah's Witness, and the latest Beatles song came out. And so someone was playing that. And I said to him, did you realize that the White Album is sitting in the British Museum opposite Codex Sinaiticus? And he sort of freaked out, that I know so much about manuscripts and all that, because most Jehovah's Witnesses don't know anything. You can talk about textual criticism with them, and they'll shut down. And that's actually a good route to go with, because you can really befuddle them and show them where there's error in their text. But yeah, I mean, for Dave Cloud, he said it was a bit of a wake-up call. These cults, Unitarians, love Sinaiticus. They love the critical text. They love all this Wettstein stuff, and Greaseback, and Bart Ehrman loves it. You get him talking about the Reformation period scholarship, he just laughs at it. Oh, Erasmus, get the circus music happening in the background. Oh, Erasmus and Beezer and King James. Oh, ha, ha, ha. And then it's like, oh, John Mill. It gets all serious, Wettstein, Greaseback, Ruckman, scholars, top-notch scholars, all this sort of stuff. I mean, when I compare those guys to the superior scholarship of Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beezer, they don't compare at all. They lack in so many areas. Okay, so we got Matthew Singleton has jumped on board, and he's saying, "Hey Nick," said, "Yeah, Cloud is extreme about that stuff." Yeah, and I mean, I guess it depends on what you've seen. Some people have only seen crazy, bizarre things, and I would. And they tend to throw out the baby with the bathwater with that. And I can understand people having that type of thing. But, I do think there is a propensity for people to nullify the word of God by tradition. Some people have got a tradition where, God can't heal and all this sort of stuff. And so they just never venture there until something happens and their grandma's dying, and then they're on the internet saying, can everyone pray? And it's like, well, I thought 1 minute ago you were saying that it's God's will and God put this on your grandma. Now you're saying what, to pray? What, against God's will? And there's just a huge amount of confusion when you put that type of doctrine into real time. And I find a lot of people they say they're cessationists, but they actually aren't. When it really hits the fan, they're praying, for certain things that are in the Bible. They're saying, God, can you do this? Can you do that? And I still believe that God can do all that. And I know someone like MacArthur will say, oh, God can do it, but he just chooses not to, and it's just Calvinistic type of thing. But so I got your message, Matthew, about the Revelation 16:5 thing. Have I got a concise video on it? I would suggest that you start off by going through probably my Jehovah video, which if I might just grab it here. Nick says Jehovah. Okay, so it goes for 120 minutes. I'll put the link there. And it's this one here. So what I actually do is read through the first section in my book where I go through Jehovah and through Yahweh. I think it's like the first chapter. But then I can send you my book and you can go through and it is quite a bit of time. But basically, to sum it up, what you're seeing here on the screen, the Tetragrammaton, this is made up of the etymology of I am. And so I had the little picture up here before, so it might be easy to see this. And so Exodus 3:14, I am is mentioned 3 times. Now, if we look at the yeah of yeah, it's he will be. If we look at the hov of hova, he is. If we look at the of haya, he was. So here we have he is, and he was, and he will be. So this is in the I ams. So when we look at this verse, the very next verse says, the Lord God of your fathers. And then it says, this is my name forever. So this Lord in all capitals is Jehovah. And so we see Jehovah is an archaic third person singular of the imperfective aspect of the verb to be. So hava means to be, okay, which is represented up here. Hava, he is, or he exists. But if God, if we were talking, if God's speaking the first person, he is. If we were speaking about God, we would say you are, or you exist, or he is the one to be in like third person sort of thing. So, and that's explained in he is, was, and will be. The exact reading of Revelation 16:5. So this is the thing where what I'm basically saying about this verse is in. I'll just get the TR webpage up here. So what I'm saying about that, when it says, and I heard the angel of the waters say, thou art righteous, O Lord. So O Lord would be the equivalent to Jehovah, which art and wast and shalt be. So you got the present, the past, and the future, because you have judged us. So most modern Bibles have which art and wast and holy, or the Holy One. So my understanding is that because this is a sacred name, or the sacred name of Jehovah, it's the expansion of Jehovah. It's the etymology of I am. This is a holy name. And so people put holy there because it's holy name. So the whole thing is a noun phrase. So if we go to Strong's 801, it has this whole thing here, ho'on kaho'en kaho'okomenos, as one word, or in a sense of it's a noun phrase. Sorry, I should say that. And yeah, when you look at Thayers, you look at Spiros of Haetes, he says the same thing, but this is a noun phrase. So the whole thing is just underneath one number. It's quite interesting. And so if I was to click on that, I've got a bit of an internal strong thing on my site that I'm sort of working on. And it's ho'on, kaho'en, kaho'o, ekomenos, and /esomenos. That all comes under that one number. So that's a noun phrase. So it's very interesting. Once you know that, you're like, well, yeah, why isn't the full name of God there? And it has holy written on it. So my understanding is that Beza mentions in Revelation 1:4 that this is a sacred name of Jehovah. So he's talking about I am and Jehovah being sacred names. So in that video that I was just showing you of Jehovah that I put in the link there, I go through the name of Jehovah and how Yahweh is the false name. And it sort of gets to a point where then if you go through my book, you can see I go to Adam Clark's commentary and a whole bunch of other commentaries, just looking at what they're saying about I am and Jehovah, and relating it to who was and is and is to come, and also who was and is and shall be, or is and was and shall be. And so, or you can also just go to my website, which has a lot of information on it. Stuff about the Ethiopic, stuff about the New King James, why they say "O Holy One," or they don't say the Holy One, they say the One, which is actually from modern versions and not from the King James stream. What other people think about it. So I think if you read through this, if you took a bit of time to do that, you would get the main gist of it. But yeah, the concept of it being like I am, I think that's the most important thing. It's in the Ethiopic, the shall be, and so yeah, here we see the Aya Asha Aya, I am that I am, and what it means. And so yeah, here we see the will be, he is, he was, and also the chiastic or the chiastic structure. So we see this structure is of design in the book of Revelation, where in the middle verse in Revelation 8:4 it has the past, the present, and the future, where the other ones have the present, the past, and the future. So you see the first two and also the last two, but this is called a chiastic structure, which was in if you study, you can click through on that. It will take you through to other material, and it shows you where that type of structure is in the book of Genesis, and also in even secular writings they have this type of thing. So where people talk about Theodore Beza had an ancient manuscript, so people say it's a conjectural emendation. Well, this was written in 1611, and it clearly says Beza hath brought to light out of an ancient manuscript the reading of Ho'osomenos. And so Beza clearly said he had an ancient manuscript. So anyway, I would go through all that. And if you want a copy of my a draft copy of my book, it's got a few typos here and there, and it's got a few things wrong, but it's like I can send you that if you just send me an email to this address, to that one at gmail.com, and then I've probably already got your address, but yeah, that way I'll get it afresh. And so at Singleton's written spiritual gifts, prophecy is not canon prophecy. Its revelation is not inspired. Canon is inspired. Yes, and that's where people make the strange assertion that they say, well, prophecy is sort of done with because that which is perfect has come, talking about the Bible or the canon, or so things are read into the Bible in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, and I believe those things are going to stop at the rapture. And so anyway, it's a whole nother discussion, but it's a very interesting one. So Matt Singleton wrote, good stuff. I want to address this in the next edition of my book. Yeah, and so I know that I'm going over and over and over stuff, and it might seem quite complicated, but really it's just because these guys want to make it complicated. Pick any topic here. The Elzevers, they had the reading of Asomenos in their second edition. In their first edition, they had Ozios, and they just, that's just a fact, but they just, want to make out that, that later on they went back to Ozios. They're just trying to make a story about every step of the way. There's just a downgrading. The worst case scenario is happening. The Dutch Statenvertaling, are they just copying the King James? They're not thinking for themselves. Brian Watton, he rejected the reading. So, no, he didn't. He followed Stephanus's TR, as he did throughout the whole entire Bible. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff on my website about this, and some of it's just Latin, so I haven't really had time to go through and translate. But yeah, we can see here, like, in Spanish Bibles, the Gomez Bible has Ceres, which is to come. Very interesting. Okay, I'll get back to the video.
He seems to be under misapprehension, and Turretin makes a similar point. He thinks that all the manuscripts have it, presumably because he doesn't see the atextual apparatus indication there.
I don't think he's saying all manuscripts have it. I think he was quoting someone who said that all manuscripts have it, who was probably talking about the Latin. I think it was in the Clementine Vulgate. So this has been cleared up by Jeff Riddle and Dane Johansson and Taylor de Soto. I'm pretty sure they went through that.
So he assumed Beza follows Stephanus' typographical error, and therefore assumes the presence of the comma in some of Stephanus' manuscripts, which is uncritical. And then in later editions, you don't even see a textual note there. And again, people can make the wrong inference from not seeing a note.
Yeah, tricking himself again, you know.
In conclusion, the general picture that arises is not very reassuring. I agree. It's not very reassuring. So we have to remember.
Yeah, if you read the books of, people who have a mindset like Bart Ehrman, you're not going to be reassured for the Textus Receptus.
Put limited weight in Beza as an editor, not because he's a bad guy, not because he's some, con artist, just because he makes mistakes. Everybody.
Okay, so, and that's the thing. It's because you're either the Lord liar or lunatic concept. So, they think he's already got errors, so they're just going to throw him into the lunatic. He's a Joe Biden guy, Mr. Forgetful, or he's a liar, and deliberately doing this sort of stuff. And so that's when you get to Erasmus. That's the conclusion. It's the only conclusion that you can really make. His modern criticism is saying that Erasmus is a complete liar and a fraud. But either way, as long as you just stay away from the Textus Receptus, as long as you stay away from other valid and sound reasonings, just follow this type of understanding where these guys are just bozos, or they're deceptive. So he says Beza's not deceptive, so he's gone with the bozo route. So the Beza Joe Biden route. He's walking up the stairs and like, oh, how did I get here? And walking back down, and I've got a manuscript now. Oh no, I don't have a manuscript now. All that sort of things happening, and so
he makes mistakes, and he did as well. And it may be safely concluded. This doesn't mean it's been proved beyond any doubt. It just means it can be safely concluded that most of Beza's text critical information was secondhand, that is derived from Henry Stephanus collations and Robert or Henry Stephanus editions. The Syriac and Arabic were also used indirectly. Even in the case of the two manuscripts he had on his desk for several years, 05 and 06, which are Codex Bezae and Codex Codex Claromontis, I think that's what he means. His use of them cannot be regarded as thorough collation, but only a haphazard consultation. Nowhere does he convey the impression that he did a real collation, like a thorough collation of those texts. Instead, he seems to have just, whenever he had an interesting point, he would go and check them and see what they said. And he calls all of the manuscripts old or very old. All of the manuscripts cited by Stephanus are called old or very old. He even sometimes includes Complutensian and Polyglot as being old or very old. And there it is. Cantabrigiensis, Bezae Cantabrigiensis, which is 05, and Codex Claromontis, which is 06, are usually called very old. And indeed, they are very old. In short, not much progress.
So, if you go through that again, I'll just rewind it so we get the proper picture. But he's saying the only quality of a manuscript that can enhance the authority of a reading taken from it is its age. But here only two categories seem to exist, old and very old. All manuscripts cited by Stephanus are called old or very old. Epithets, which sometimes even include the Complutensian polyglot. Okay, so he's got a footnote 123. So which sometimes even include the Complutensian polyglot. Okay, so what is it in a group of things? So is he saying, well, the old manuscripts have it, even the Complutensian has it, and it's like, oh, because he's mentioned old and the Complutensian in that sentence. Yeah, and so he's got a footnote here, 123. So let's see if we can. We're at the 32-minute mark. Maybe I should just grab this book, Crans, Beyond What Is Written. And we're at page 244. To the 127. For example, in the preface to the first edition, we maintained this restriction in accordance with the warning to not change a tittle on the basis of reason or pure conjecture. Okay. 244. Pretty sure. I'll just double check that. Yeah, 244. Okay, 124. So this page. Stephanus's preference to his third edition. Scholars interested in the rhetoric of our craft may notice that manuscripts are usually called old when the readings are rejected, whereas they often become very old when their readings are regarded more favorably. Besides, it has to be noted that the typical 16th century reference to very old manuscripts on the title pages and in prefaces has two aspects. It is, of course, propaganda made by the publisher, not just honest scholarship, but propaganda. But it may also reflect the humanist conviction of having returned to the presumably pristine sources. Moreover, no good scholarly standards of measuring the antiquity of the manuscript had yet been developed. So Erasmus's estimation of Codex Reuchlini in the 1527 edition to the annotation qui apparet et nemo claudit on Revelation 3:7. So I guess he was saying that it was old or the oldest. But the thing is, that was a commentary that had a commentary based, I think it was in the 4th century, Tritonius. Maybe that was Beatus of Libana's one. But he's not really sourcing anything there, is he? So he's saying competency in polyglot, 123. For example, Matthew 9:36, Eskulmenoi, 10:12, Legontes, Irene to oiko, tafto. And so anyway, I'll skip over all that Greek. It says the fact that the Complutensian is referred to as a manuscript confirmed that Beza's use of manuscript evidence was haphazard. Okay. But it's not really saying that it's old. Because here he's saying all manuscripts cited by Stephanus are old or very old. Epithets, which sometimes even include the Complutensian polyglot. Okay. And so when we come to here, he's not really giving an example of this. So I guess, you have to look up these places in the Complutensian polyglot or examining the Complutensian polyglot, but looking at Beza in these places. He's not really saying which edition. So I guess that's in all editions. Okay, anyway, I'll just move on from there.
Press was made from Erasmus' day to Beza's day in terms of that. Now, this book that I'm quoting from, the first part is about Erasmus, the second part is about Beza. He's called a conservative textual critic. It's largely correct. He tends to just stick with what Stephanus has and not to change it, although he'll make lots of annotations about why maybe it should be changed. But he does change it in some places. And he does seem to sometimes be more interested to just let people know about the existence of errant readings without actually deciding for the reader which should be the right reading. Franz doesn't pull his punches. He says the generally poor quality of Beza's textual criticism as far as his use of sources is concerned does not preclude his making conjectures on the Greek text. So it's not great quality.
Poor quality of Beza's textual criticism. And see, I was listening to TurretinFan's like today. It was doing another video. I think it was talking about Matthew Verscher. That's where I stopped. I was like, this goes for ages. And I was just listening to what he was saying, and it was like he doesn't understand that the text criticism that Beza and Erasmus was doing is poles apart from like I explained this on my Textus Receptus website. I might just get that. So if you go here, because this has been one of James White's things. Oh, they were doing textual criticism. It's like saying, the Chinese do politics, so they have the same thing as the Americans. So no, it's a different type of politics. That's the main thing. And so modern textual criticism, this is on the front page of my website. Modern textual criticism is focused on a narrowing of the field to a few corrupted and rejected manuscripts, sidestepping the huge amount of Greek and Latin manuscripts and the early church witnesses as unimportant, only to be used when they can be referenced to try and give some support to Vaticanus' primary corruption. It is really an anachronism fallacy, a false definition, to speak of Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza, I should have a comma there, doing textual criticism, since their value were in general opposite to those of Griesbach, to Hort, Metzger, to Wallace Confusions. They based themselves mostly on Greek and Latin manuscripts and the early church witnesses with some faith-consistent, logical, grammatical type internal evidence considerations. So this is talking about Erasmus, Stephanus, and Beza. They based themselves mostly on the Greek and Latin manuscripts and the early church witnesses with some faith-consistent, logical, grammatical type of internal evidence considerations. This is essentially the opposite of textual criticism as used today, which has a bias presupposition towards Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, and all you have to do is look at the last 12 verses of Mark to see this insane bias. Okay.
Textual criticism, but he nevertheless makes conjectures. This is a bit different, by the way, from Kron's take on Erasmus. Erasmus has this amazing intuition for textual criticism, a really incredible intuition, and he uses it quite effectively. Not infallibly, but quite effectively, and does a lot of great work with it. Beza is no Erasmus, so it's not like Beza benefits.
It's so frustrating to listen to this, like written by a Bart Ehrman-ish type of person. It's a bit like what is that book? I've got a book there about the King James translators called God's Secretaries, and very interesting book. I can't see it just now, but God's Secretaries was written by Adam Nicholson. Interesting book, and I remember I didn't know anything about the translators, and I read that book and I was like fascinated by Lancelot Andrews, but looking back now, I realize almost everything he says about the King James translators, about King James himself, was wrong. It's just not. It's based on loose facts. He's looking for spicy, saucy, King James was gay and a pedophile and all this sort of stuff, and it's just, when you look back, it's just ridiculous. But I read through it and went, oh wow, it's got some interesting information, and it made me search more. But then after years and years of looking and reading stuff, I was like, actually, that Adam Nicholson book's pretty weird, and then I've gone through tons of other books similar, like The Cradle King. What was it? The Power and Glory. Actually, that's the same book. God's Secretaries. And there's that one in the beginning. Oops.
A bit from Erasmus, but basically it's not an Erasmus. So let's see.
Card fell out and started the video. That's the book. Power and Glory. Power and Glory. Jacobean England and the making of the King James Bible. And so that book there, I remember reading through it and going, wow. And I sort of really enjoyed the whole concept of Lancelot Andrews. But it sort of made me think that the translators were just a bunch of bozos. And I fully just believed. I just went, oh, okay. So maybe they did a good job, but, you know, they were a bunch of idiots. And that's where I think TurretinFan is with all this. He's like, oh, okay, well, they did an okay job here and there, but, you know, they were a bunch of idiots, and I'm just believing this book because, you know, it's what I want to do. Hopefully he'll read through all this, and then he'll see for the next, 5 years or whatever, constant contradictions against this material, and he'll have to go with his conscience and say, yeah, this book is actually poisoning the well.
You can't. Here's a key point. It's not possible to discuss all of Beza's conjectures in the scope of the study that Crohn's is offering. And he says they have a wide range of conjecturality. Sometimes there's no attestation of any kind. Some have indirect or patristic or versional, including patristic or versional attestation. Sometimes he infers readings from the Vulgate or in later editions from the Syriac. He was not always well informed. Even on the attestation of readings he mentioned or adopted, in some readings taken from the Complutensian polyglot may be conjectures by the Complutensian editors, even though Beza didn't know this. So he assumed that Complutensian had manuscripts to back it up, but they may have been conjectures at some point.
See the layer upon layer. It's like, the Complutensian guys, they were doing exactly the same. They were also just making up readings, out of thin air. And Beza thinks, they've got this reading there, but no, they don't, because it just goes on and on of just corruption. They're just trying to make out that he's project, because they have a corrupt text that has, the wrong history, it has the wrong genealogical lists, it has the wrong geography, it has the wrong numbers, it has all sorts of errors in it, solecisms in it. They want to project that onto the TR. That's what they're doing. It's projection. These are why aren't they looking in their own backyard? So this is the thing. Bart Ehrman's actually looking in his own backyard going, wow, our text actually says that they believe that Joseph and Mary were, the parents of Jesus, where the TR doesn't have that problem, but their text does. King James people point out this problem as well. Bart Ehrman's just going, look at our text. It's got problems. See, it's contradiction. The Bible's rubbish, sort of thing. But they're projecting onto us that we've got a problem. That they have a problem. And they got Bart Ehrman just saying, yeah, look at this. Let's just state the obvious. And we've been saying that stuff for years. So
he goes in a variety. In this case, he says it's a rare exception to his usual practice. He actually adopts this conjecture into the Greek text. And it's surprising to see him introduce and adopt a conjecture so easily, considering his previous comment that he does not change even a tittle based on mere conjecture. Nevertheless, here he releases a conjecture and adopts it throughout all editions. So anyway, he goes through some more detailed analysis of the value of the conjectures. He mentions a few places. One is Romans 7:6. Interestingly, on this one, he appeals to Chrysostom's reading and then states that it must have been the received reading in Chrysostom's day, but then, unfortunately, he's poorly analyzed Chrysostom. He has the arguments quoted here. Then he says, although he consults his commentary directly, notices that it only occurs in the commentary and not in the biblical text quoted, he still maintains its reading, and he should have known better. where he actually cites a sentence from Chrysostom which follows the passage proving him wrong. Instead, he goes to considerable length to defend his error, even invoking the possibility that the father's lemma has been corrected or corrupted towards the usual text. So he tries to use Chrysostom. Chrysostom doesn't quite help him, so he says Chrysostom must have been changed as well. So anyway.
Well, the complete works of Chrysostom weren't done until many years later with Henry Saville and Lancelot Andrews and Andrew Downes and a bunch of the King James translators. So there could have been contradictory readings there. But, TurretinFan's just like, well, that's just another thing, and, I've dealt with people, I've been, in discernment for long enough to know when someone is sold on something. And, I've been the bad guy who has to tell people that Billy Graham's probably not even saved and he doesn't believe in a literal hell, and had people upset and screaming out and saying, you can't say that, and crying and all sorts of things. And I've been the one who's blown the whistle on Hillsong and said, they're covering up pedophilia, and, oh, no, that would never happen. And then all of a sudden the government got involved and the Royal Commission happened. It's, oh, yeah, it actually did happen. They covered up, 14 rapes that Frank Houston, did, one of the main leaders of the Pentecostal church here in Australia. And I've seen pastors just, just gloss over it all and make a joke of it and all the rest of it. And it's just deception. I've been involved with enough discernment type of material to just see when people will just believe whatever they want to back up their position. Okay. Now, I'm not saying TurretinFan is, on the level of, Hillsong and all the rest of it. But what I'm saying is, just to even be just swallowing what Jan Kranz is saying here without, going in and just double checking it. And he's just going, Beza was an idiot. Oh, look, Beza did this as well, and he did that as well. It's just like reading The Onion or something. I remember I used to get these World News Weekly with Bat Boy and all sorts of strange and funny stories about, they were just all rubbish. And that's how I view like Jan Kranz, Bart Ehrman type of stuff. The vast majority of it's rubbish. Yes, they have to have some facts and stats and figures just to get you going, but it's like what they're saying here, it's the vast majority of the time, if you take this to the nth degree and you study it and you think about it and you go through just one little section, you actually know he's highlighting this tiny little point that makes it look like it's another banana peel moment, another Joe Biden moment, when it's not. Oh, I guess, and then you point it out to Jan Kranz or some other people and they're like, we don't care. We've got a story. We like the story. So it only becomes problematic if another critical text person points those things out. Then they're like, which is amazing because someone like Nehemiah Gordon, who's pretty much on the same boat as me with the whole I am Jehovah link with all that. He has recently come out and been highly involved with testing the ink on Vaticanus, on the dots that were appearing, say, at 1 John 5:7 and the Arabic numerals and things like that. And so he's been involved with that, which is quite interesting because up until he did that, the whole concept of, Jehovah, scholarly name, and the name of Yahweh is a name of a pagan god. Now he's accepted by the academy. So those things are all of a sudden going to become, a proper PhD scholar who's in our ranks now believes this, and it's going to come out like, see, it's right. So that's the thing. These people, they follow teachers. They have itching ears. And I've proven this many times. I've been on Facebook, said things, and I remember Peter Gurry. He just said something. I said, well, you're straining at a gnat and you're swallowing a camel. And he said, well, no, I'm not. He said, and even that verse, you quoted it wrong. I said, no, it's straining at a gnat. Scrivener in his Cambridge edition of 1873 says straining out a gnat. It's not straining out, it's straining at a gnat. It's pretty well proven. And he wanted to debate it on Facebook with me. He was like, no, you're wrong, blah, blah, blah. So what I did, and I purposely did this, I went to James Snap's website because he's on the same page as me on this, even though we're at loggerheads on the TR issue. He's like, well, yeah, it does say straining. And not half the time he just borrows the stuff from King James people anyway. But I just would only get snippets from his website and put it into Facebook. I'll say, well, Peter Gurry, what about this? No. Peter Gurry, what about this? No. Peter Gurry. And then James Snap jumped on, 5 hours later or whatever, and said, actually, Nick's correct. Here's my website link. And then Peter Gurry was like, oh, I didn't realize that. I'm really sorry, James. So is he really looking at the evidence unbiasedly and just going, I don't care who's saying it. It's either factual or it's not. It's either true or it's not. Not, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Because I'm a Democrat and I'm going to fight tooth and nail against the Republicans, or I'm a Republican and I'm going to fight tooth and nail against the Democrats. Just can you just put all that aside, all your presuppositions aside, and look at the facts? Can you look objectively at Jan Kranz's material and double check all these sources? Or are you just going to accept it because it's it helps your story? Why let the pesky facts get in the way of a good story?
He goes on, he talks about another situation in which Beza's notes are smoothed in a direction that seems to strengthen Beza's position. He refers to this Pia Fraus, or perhaps just inadvertency, but the idea is he has said if all manuscripts becomes all Latin manuscripts, which kind of hides the fact that it's all manuscripts. It's also all Greek. And the fact that he says all Latin makes it sound like there is now some Greek manuscripts attestation. And he's wrong to make such a clarification. The Greek doesn't support him either. The fact that he changed the wording there is troubling, though, because it does.
Turretin's troubled. This is just a joke. It's like someone watching a Bart Ehrman show and going, oh, the virgin birth's not real,
Look like, now this Pia Fraus is essentially a white lie. It looks like it's sort of this white lie in order to support the text that he has. And that becomes more concerning if Beza is willing to make these changes. If he's doing it deliberately, it's really bad.
Anyway, I had hope. I had high hopes for TurretinFan. I don't think I can see any hope with him behaving like this. It's like, anyway, after this is my 29th response video, and he's doing this.
He's doing it carelessly. That's still pretty bad. And anyway, it reduces the value of Beza's notes as a witness for the text, especially when it comes to textual critical issues. There's also
so just like James White, we're just looking for anything to win this debate point, and once we've won it, we can shut the door and just never look back. Instead of let's examine these things, let's look closely, not just to drive by and look at the banner and it says what you want it to say. Think about what you're saying about Beza here, and I don't care if the guy's dead. Like, if someone just came out and said that your great grandfather was a pedophile, you'd be disgusted and you'd be like, hang on, how can you say that? Is there any proof? And when people brought proof, they would have to double check everything. You would double check everything and make sure it's legit. And if it's not legit, you'd get angry about it. And that's the thing. I've gone through this material. I've seen the ridiculous ideas that have come out. Pretty much, these guys just are scouring scholarship for anything negative against the Textus Receptus, and they just put it in their books. And so it seems like that's what James White does as well. In his King James only controversy, it's like he's just gotten Doug Hudelick and a whole bunch of other guys and just gone, what arguments do you have against the King James, against the TR position? He's not doing books about the NIV or the ESV, the ridiculous, stupid readings that are in them. Like the ESV, I think it's 1 Samuel 13, where it has, I think it's Saul lived for ... years. was he was ... years of age, and some of them have he was 1 year of age when he became king. But the story is, he was head and shoulders above everyone else, and it's like, oh, guys, you have no idea what you're doing.
Some places where he actually rearranges the text, and some of those are in Revelation. Notice this sentence though. The first also concerns Revelation, the text of which was regarded by Beza as more uncertain than other parts of the New Testament. Because it's more uncertain, then naturally it would follow that Beza is more willing to correct and change the text that he's received.
And so the thing is, I've actually dealt with this material, so I would hope that TurretinFan would listen to my material and go, oh, young Kranz mistranslates Olam there. If you go with Erica Rummel's reading, you don't have that problem. But it just depends on how far TurretinFan wants to dig into this. I mean, I've dug into it. That's why whenever I look at Kranz, and especially when he's talking about the latest stuff with the manuscripts and stuff like that at Revelation 16:5, or the manuscript reading of Beza, he's just making up stories. he will just make up anything. That's what Bart Ehrman does. He's not dealing with the facts. He's just trying to dismiss facts. But if TurretinFan wants to go down that route, I mean, kudos to him. He'll go far. If you do that, you'll become very popular. I mean, Kranz is popular in text critical circles. Bart Ehrman's popular. Text critical circles. James White's popular. Text critical circles sprout all this stuff. Joe Biden moments and banana peel moments, and these guys are idiots, and these guys tricked themselves, and these guys, didn't reference things properly. They lied, white lied, whatever you want to call it, But then you've got the whole, the Reuchlin manuscript thing of Delitzsch. It's like, Erasmus said he had, amended a few words, but no, Delitzsch found a manuscript where there's 136 words missing, and that becomes the official manuscript for all scholars to accept without question, or else you're a kook. And it's like, no, Erasmus clearly says in his annotations that he was talking about the Book of Life section there, and he amended it. He spotted Homo, Tom. But no, you got to believe Delitzsch. And so, Franz Delitzsch, he did the Hebrew Bible in 1840s or something like that, and Tregelles, he backed him up, and so it must be true, because he was an evangelical.
Though Beza's theory on the status and transmission of the text of Revelation makes it easier for him to venture conjectural solutions, his contributions are by no means limited to that book only. So that's page 314. The point being that Beza is willing to and does alter the book of Revelation, not just the book of Revelation, but he's quite willing to in the case of the book of Revelation. So one of the differences between Erasmus and Beza is that Erasmus is okay with just talking about conjectures, just being very free in talking about it. Beza is reluctant to make conjectures or to endorse them. It says the only instance outside of the New Testament editions, if you remember earlier, I said most of the comments about his textual criticism are from his annotations. Here's the exception. The only one is in a writing against Castellio or Castellio. In the discussion of a reading in 2 Peter 2:14, he censures the edition of Collineus, this Simon de Collines, as based on the conjecture in its many alterations from both the Erasmian editions and the Complutensian polyglot. He says, Beza says, moreover, Castilio cites Collines' copy, which I do not value highly, unless it is sustained by the agreement of other books. For I have found that in this copy, many things have been corrected on the basis of mere conjectures by someone who is, in any case, very learned in the Greek language. The very instance that prompts Beza to this aside is actually judged incorrectly by Beza, according to Kranz, and it's not only possible, the reading which he dismisses is not only possible, but it's also reasonably well attested. This is kind of funny. It even seems that Beza's opinion on the edition is generally unfounded, but he mistrusts it because he believes that it's based on conjectures, and that's something we should come back to. So on the one hand, while we call this based, some people, a lot of people, and myself included, refer to this as Beza's conjecture at Revelation 16:5, I think it's important to note Beza himself is distrustful of conjectures. So us being distrustful of Beza's conjecture is us being like Beza in a way that's good. I was
Oh, this just gets worse and worse.
Say, Kranz might disagree. Kranz might be more willing to do conjectures than I am.
I don't mean to just laugh at and dismiss it. What I mean by it's getting worse and worse is we've proven it's not a conjectural emendation. Okay, just because James White says it It doesn't mean that has to be the official for the next 50 years. Okay? It's already been like that since he wrote his book. Most people are like conjectural emendation, Theodore Beza, conjectural emendation, and just parroting it. And so we've proven it's not a conjectural emendation. Beza clearly said he had an ancient manuscript. Just wave your hand. That doesn't exist anymore. Well, we don't have it today. So according to TurretinFan and James White's tenacity concepts, you just can't even fathom that there's been a manuscript. I mean, if God wanted to preserve his word, he would have preserved that manuscript. And so because he didn't, that can't be the reading. That's what his conclusions are. That's his presupposition. Okay. And saying that he's being like Beza by not wanting conjectures, it's like, well, and Jeff Riddle did quite a good article on the Collinnaeus text and Calvin, because Calvin was very influenced by this text, and then he actually moved away from it. And so this was considered like a little bit of a text with certain variants, which people wouldn't really usually go with, and so I guess it could have been based more on the Complutensian polyglot or something like that. And so, but Calvin at a certain period in his ministry actually stopped using that text and started using something else. And so, but it's interesting. Collinnaeus, I think he was Stephanus's stepfather or uncle or something like that. I'm pretty sure there was relation there. I could be wrong.
But no, I think in this case we're being like Beza by questioning Beza. In this case, Beza writes on the book with the collations given to him by Stephanus regarding, he says, this is a more important statement. This, above all, supported me greatly, and in very many instances, where sometimes I saw confirmed by the authority of a manuscript what otherwise used to rest only upon the conjecture of the interpreters. Other times we were given an opportunity to know the truth from the traces of an old reading, in which, however, we maintained this restriction in accordance with the warning not to change a tittle on the basis of reason or pure conjecture. So, unfortunately, we don't have Henry Stephanus collation notes. They're seemingly lost. Maybe someday they will be found. I don't know. I would love to be the scholar who finds that. It would be probably one of the earlier editions of Stephanus, like a third edition or something like that, marked with collation notes by Henry Stephanus, handwritten collation notes. It would really be an invaluable find for folks who are trying to track down the development of Beza's work. It's kind of a priceless, in that sense, a priceless find. We'll be able to find it, but we don't have it. So it's certainly possible that there's some note at Revelation 16:5 in Henry Stephanus' collation. The reason I say that it seems likely that there is some note is because
it's because they want this story to be true. So it's like, I wish I found the missing link in evolution, because that would be great. So I'm going to go and dig up some ground and look around for the the half man, half monkey head somewhere, and that'll prove my case. It's like there's just absolutely no proof whatsoever that that's what Beza used, but it's just become the story that's just getting parroted. And unfortunately, I can't see much difference between TurretinFan just parroting this material of Kranz, who is, I mean, as I went through last time, beyond what is written, you just look at the front page, beyond what is written, and then it's like edited by Metzger and Bart Ehrman. And you think in 2006, Bart Ehrman, he was a conservative guy. He was loose. Dan Wallace is still writing books against his orthodox corruption concept that he brought out in the 90s. In 93, I think that was brought out. So anyway.
Stephanus edition has a note at Revelation 16:5. It's just a reference to the Complutensian polyglot, which has a different reading of Revelation 16:5. But since there's already a handwritten note there, it's quite possible that there's something confusing about the note, or that there's some additional notes even some speculation or question about the text of, about the wording of the text. Henry Stephanus is really great with Greek and a very intelligent man. He may well have had his own speculation about this, and those his own speculations may have been confused as being a textual reading. It's possible. Well, there's many things that are possible, but we don't know what's actually there. It would be nice to have it, but that would explain, if Henry Stephanus has a note there, that would explain why there, Beza thinks there's some kind of manuscript with a different reading. If he thinks there's a manuscript with a different reading.
It'd be great to have everything, but it's like the reason TurretinFan wants that is so he can have this story to try and disprove the concept that Beza just simply said he had a manuscript. And so you can see how far he's going. He's just hoping and believing that this whole Henry Stephanus type of anecdote is true, He
says Beza is reluctant to change the text on the basis of manuscripts or conjecture. So even when there's one or two manuscripts, Beza is not willing to change the text for that reason. So he does have this concept of Textus Receptus even before the Elsevier edition that uses that phrase, but he does have the idea of a text that's received. And unfortunately, Beza starts applying that to his own editions as well. So his own conjectures become a matter of reception. So also his view on conjectural imitation seems to have hardened over time. So in an earlier edition, he says, to me, it was, however, a matter of scrupulousness not to change anything out of mere conjecture. And he enhances that in the 1589 edition to say, to me, it has, however, always been a matter of utmost scrupulousness not to change even a tittle in these holy books out of a mere conjecture. So you can see it kind of expanded and enhanced his comment. And then at the end of his discussion of the conjecture of Hebrews 12:6, he says, but may the crime be far from me to change even so small a thing in these sacred records against all manuscripts and interpreters. And yet, unfortunately, we see he seems to have done that at Revelation 16:5. So he has committed the crime, he should do the time, if that's the case. Even expressions which lead the readers.
He's committed the crime, he should do the time. Okay.
Their freedom of judgment after Beza's discussion are often omitted in later editions. So that's an interesting point. But he says, despite all these developments, his core is basically stable and unchanged and static. He only applies emendation with codices sparingly. And unfortunately, Kranz doesn't address that manuscript emendation in this book. That would be an excellent field for future research for Kranz if he's interested. Especially would be of interest to us because the Revelation 16 claim that there's some kind of manuscript there. But anyway, let's see. A lot of his conjectures are similar to those of Erasmus. The reason for that seems fairly straightforward to me, which is that he had a copy of Erasmus's notes and he's working from them. So Erasmus had made a comment about Revelation 16:5. It seems quite clear that Beza's comments are for the same reason. Kranz created this interesting diagram of kind of the problem faced by Beza. Beza thinks that Scripture is perfect. I agree with him. The text contains errors. That's also true. The text needs emendation, which is true in some cases. And then Scripture is untouchable is the point that causes a lot of tension. Because Scripture is perfect, therefore it's untouchable. But because the text has errors, therefore it needs emendation. And the difference between text and Scripture is a bit tight. It's hard to separate those out. When it comes to his, in another book, now I don't know if it's published first or second, but anyway, this is from his Theodoros Beza in New Testament Contextual Emendation. He has a similar description of Beza. He says, at first sight, Beza is a typical representative of the tradition of reluctance towards contextual emendation. Specific annotations, however, show us another, more liberal attitude. In other words, more free to make conjectures. In most instances, his conjectures remain restricted to his annotations. They don't make it into the text. But when he does even adopt them, he does so for various reasons. He expects the text to be grammatically and logically smooth. And even more important, he has a harmonistic view of the text. In other words, it needs to form a harmony. It needs to be grammatically smooth, it needs to have a harmony, it needs to be logically smooth. And of course, this does explain why we have the reading we have at Revelation 16:5, where Beza has attempted to smooth things out. Things that probably shouldn't have been smooth are smooth. So, what can we do with that?
Well, I guess you got to go with the difficult reading because that's your method of textual criticism. So you've got to go with the strangest, most bizarre reading That people, Erasmus is like, oh, that's strange. Bella's like, no, I think it should say Agios or whatever he said, and Beza's like, but no, you got to go with the harder reading. You got to go with readings that have the wrong genealogy. That's what happens in the critical text, or the wrong location. We had the swine marathon, the pigs running 30 kilometers some direction. All these weird, bizarre, strange numbers that appear. Instead of Jesus sent out to 70, it's like 72. Numbers that are wrong. Saul was for ... years in the ESV, and this type of stuff is all over the place with translations and with the critical text, and with how they use the Septuagint and other things in the Old Testament. But specifically the critical text in the New Testament, there are so many errors in it. God was manifest in the flesh, changed into who appeared in a body, creating the biggest solecism in the critical text. Even Westcott and Hort admitted that it was a solecism. They introduced to the committee the whole concept of a hymn, that it's an ancient hymn that Paul just broke into. He was like, great is the mystery of godliness, and then the guitar started, he appeared in a body, he would, and it became a song. That's why it's so abrupt. But if you have a predicate with a subject there, you have great is the mystery of godliness, God was manifest in the flesh. There is no grammatical error, and it runs smoothly, and it's probably the strongest verse for the deity of Christ. But instead, no, they had Unitarians on their committee saying, don't put that in, don't put it, and it's not in the Nestle Alarm text. But that's the type of goofiness that happens in the Nestle Alarm type of readings. But it's when I hear criticisms of Erasmus and Stephanus and Beza from people who read that type of text and follow those type of readings, I'm like, okay, well, I wasn't expecting you guys to be, bulwarks of truth, and standing for what's right, and you're standing for what's, and the thing is, the strange and most bizarre thing of running with the majority text all of a sudden. Why? just say, well, we don't really care about the majority text. Flush them down the toilet. Let's go with the Codex Sinaiticus and Alexandrian, whatever else there is. And as I've pointed out, before the 10th century, there's only 4 manuscripts, and they disagree on those readings. And so,
let's see. I actually want to come back to the chapter itself, because we haven't made much progress into the chapter. We're 47 minutes in. He says, his main points. He says, let's evaluate the main points. Jehovah comes from to be and is related to the triadic declaration. And he claims.
Is he going to fight against this? Most probably. Jehovah comes from to be. Just yes. It's like, this is like 1 + 1 = 2. Jehovah comes from to be. You could probably just look that up anywhere. But
claims that White denied this on Twitter. I don't really care whether White denied it or didn't deny it. I think we could grant Nick this general point.
He thinks he can grant me this general point, but 1 + 1 = 2, that Jehovah comes from to be. I was under the pump with that one. It's oh man, he just doesn't want to give any ground, not even a basic etymology of the word. To be, hava. No. Oh, listen to the first video in this series. No, it doesn't come from. Oh no, it doesn't. No. And then it's like, oh, yeah, perhaps.
If we mean that the name Jehovah has an etymological relationship to the word for to be in Hebrew, and that these names, the one who is, the being, the having been, and becoming, that those are related to the name of Jehovah. Now, related is a broad term. but I think we could probably grant this point.
Anyway, I think from watching him gobble up all that stuff from Kranz, gladly, just like a rat eating the cheese, just watching the trap go down. I'm just there going, I don't think I'm going to see much of a change. I don't think he's going to go back to the etymological roots of I am, Jehovah, looking at all those sort of things, the past, the future, the present tenses of the I am statements in Exodus 3:14. But he is going through all this material, and I think he wants to debate on this. I mean, what's he going to do in the debate? I mean, when you're in a debate, all he has to do is, Beza doesn't have that exact reading. It's like, well, I'm not saying he has that exact reading. I'm saying he's got the future form. And it's like, that would have to be, probably, does the King James, or does the Beza have the shall be reading? And then when he's like, no, it's like, or does the Ethiopic, or was the shall be reading before Beza? He'd have to admit yes, because he's admitted yes. But then he's like, no, Beza doesn't have the reading. What, the reading? You're talking about readings, plural now. So you've shifted the goalposts. And you're talking about something else.
And that Jesus is Jehovah, which hopefully no one would doubt who's a Christian. I am also means who is and was and shall be. So now this is an interesting claim. It's hard to object that the term I am means specifically those three things, but in any event, the point is, it's not very objectionable. That means that thing. The I am in English Bible versions shows shall be as a reasonable reading. Now at this point, I think it's just a throwaway point. Even if shall be is a reasonable interpretation of the Hebrew in the Old Testament, the New Testament demonstrates that it's not the best reading for I am.
As I mentioned, there's a lexical definition and there's a contextual definition. In the lexical definition, it's all in the future form. So that's why Coverdale had shall be. That's why Martin Luther had shall be there. Well, I am that I am. I shall be who I shall be. And tell them that shall be sent you. That's what they have. And that's because you have the lexical form, but then you have the context. And also you have Jesus saying, I am ego eimi in the Gospel of Matthew. And so it's pretty clear that that's the form that God wanted to specifically talk in. But for me, pointing out those things, it's is it true or not? I'm just pointing out the facts. It's not like I've pointed out 20 facts, and I'm just like, well, okay, well, this is just 1 + 1 = 2, but then 2 + 2 = 4. Do you agree with that as well? He's like, yeah, I guess, but
Hutters has shall be in his Hebrew edition with is to come in his Greek.
Okay, just dismisses it. That Elijah Hutter, who did a 12-language dodecaglot, did his own Hebrew edition. So he would have known the Hebrew language. If you read through what he has there, and so I might just go back to my my page. Actually, it might even be quicker to go to Bibles online.net. And grab Hutter. Go to the Book of Revelation. Turn off this flipping sound so it doesn't deafen you. And then just go to say okay, chapter 20. Should be able to find 16 pretty easily. Das 2. Okay, yeah, that's the entire book. That's why. Apocalypsis, chapter 3. Okay, what's that? 17, 18, 17. Okay, so we're on to 16 now. We just got to find number 5. Here. Let's zoom it right in. 12 language dodecaglot. So he has Kyrie here. So he has Lord. A. Un. Kai or N. Ho'un kai ho'un kai ho'ekomenos. So he doesn't have a somenos there. That's got to be taken into consideration. And he has his own Hebrew text. But you'll notice it has Jehovah here. It has Haya here. Haya. Now, remember in my picture, Haya, he was. Okay. Maybe we can keep this close. So we have Haya. So this is the Asher. Jehovah, Asher, Haya. And then it has Asher, Hova. So that's the word Hova there. Okay. And then it has the word Yeh, which is this one here. He will be. Exactly, I am. Exactly. In Hebrew. So let's just go through it again. Jehovah, Asher, and so you can see here the Haya. Okay, see down here the Ha, the Het, and the Yod and the Het with the Patak. Then you have the Hova here. You got the holum up the top there because it's Ho, and it's got the exact same pointing. And then you see Yeh here. Okay. Yeh. He will be. Which is what is mentioned here in the I ams, which makes up Jehovah. Is, was, and will be. But he's just like, I'm like, well, it's got it in Hutter's New Testament, because wouldn't you go, okay, well, Jewish New Testament, it has like I am, but in those 3 forms, which makes up the Triadic Declaration, which is the name of Jehovah. Oh, whatever. It's like, oh, okay. No,
there's no. Again, that seems like a throwaway point. Easy to acknowledge and easy to move past it. The New Testament Hebrew of Hutter at Revelation 16:5 is akin to Hava, to be. Again, it seems like a throwaway point because Hutter is building his Hebrew on Beza's Greek. So
no, Hutter did his own translation. It wouldn't matter there because it doesn't say, we've got no proof that Hutter was using Beza's Greek, because in the Greek he has erkomenos there. He doesn't have a somenos, the reading in Beza, but in the Hebrew it does, because it's the name of God. You can't. How can he, being someone in Hebrew, have the Hebrew Bible? Now that would be an interesting thing to look at the Tremelius edition and see what he has in the book of Revelation in his Hebrew edition. And so I might even look that up now. So Matthew 1:1. Textus Receptus. This is just my way of getting to certain links that I remember. So I know I wrote out a whole bunch of stuff under Theodore Beza. And then you've got Tremellius. Okay, so I've got his Syriac New Testament. So I might have to go to books. Books. And maybe Hebrew or Tremellius. No, so I might have to go outside of my site. Go Tremellius Hebrew. Hopefully this links to it. You guys can't see what I'm doing. Sorry about that. There's Tremellius. Okay. Now that would be interesting to look at, the Syriac grammar, because he might mention the Ethiopic there. It'll be interesting to see if he does. Henry Stephanus. Yeah, that would be the addition to look at. Okay. So we're looking at a Hebrew New Testament. SDNA. That looks interesting, but it's 1633. But so it's only showing a few pages. Here we go. Chaldean grammar. I wonder if I search for Ethiopic. Nope. Okay, so this looks more like, okay, so that's the Latin with Jehovah there. Yeah, that's the Latin of Beza, Tremellius, and Jenius there. So I guess I'm looking for the Hebrew, so Okay, sorry guys if it's boring you to tears, but wow, this looks interesting. It's the Hebrew grammar. I wonder if he has I am there. Probably does. And this is the sort of books, these were the books that I was going through when I was preparing for Revelation 16:5. I was just going through here finding things like Haya, Hava, because it's very, if you're learning any language, to learn the words like to be, or future and past, and that's I will be at the shop, I will be there tomorrow, I won't be there, I wasn't there, that type of thing. Okay. Look, Haya. Interesting. That's in the Syriac with the Hebrew letters. Okay. Let's see what this one is. It's just a Latin again. There's Yahoo Shahule or something. Anyway. Okay, so this is the Hebrew syntax by Henry Stephanus. And it's quite a big book, 250 pages. Anyway, you can see that I'm fading and just doom scrolling. So just trying to find bits and pieces. So what we'll do, we'll finish up there. So we've gone to the 49-minute, so basically the 50-minute mark on that one. And I'll just hide that so I can see it. And so we've still got a few hours to go on that one. It was quite complicated, so I had to stop it. And the thing is, I could have just let it run, gone through it, but now you know what I think about it. And so that's why I do these videos. I don't hide anything. I just tell you exactly how I'm feeling about it. And, I think TurretinFan would appreciate that I'm not beating around the bush. I'm just saying, I think you following Qurans and you following white is detrimental to your understanding of correct bibliology. And I think he would appreciate that I'm just being straight out with him and saying, well, I think that's a problem, rather than just being like, okay, it's okay, brother, and we're all, let's sing Kumbaya and live happily ever after. I'm saying these guys are dangerous. These guys are Bart Ehrmans, just with a Christian badge. Just got to be careful of just accepting, like, regardless of the whole Revelation 16:5 thing, jumping into Jan Kran's material and just accepting what he's saying. Like, if I just got up on the screen here misquoting Jesus and I'm just reading along going, yeah, that sounds so logical. Yeah, look at that. Yep. Yeah, Matthew was an idiot. Yeah. Oh, look at Luke. Luke was just copying everyone. Oh, yeah, John. No, he probably didn't write that either. Yeah. And just believing everything. You'd be going, I feel sorry for this guy, and that's why I was saying it's sad, that you are going that route. Because to me, Kranz is just, he's talking about a few different things, but he is just like Bart Ehrman in his argumentation. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. God bless you guys. Thanks for putting up with my doom scrolling for some of these books. But as we continue to go along, we'll gain more and more insight, and I'll grow in the things of God, and all things work out for the good to those who love God and are called according to his promises. They work together for good. So I think that's great news. Okay, God bless you guys, and we'll see you another time.